It's almost like
find out that you were autistic?
By reading, by studying it. I was like, hey, I do that.
They're talking about
I
me.
do that. Any function taken too far is a disorder. The problem is that autism is first a function. So for example, with autism, they cannot jump. There's a problem with eccentric and loading. I make them pull a rope because I needed to have a beginning and an end. You met anxious people. An anxious person will always be anxious. This is good. It can drive you to do more and everything. But the real problem is when they start crashing from that, falling into depression, falling into panic attacks. So the only moment where they're not anxious is when they're doing.
How does some of this research and some of what you've been doing, how does it help with PTSD?
A trauma created a prior. You're putting too much weight into that prior. So what do? Exposure therapy. We're going to introduce stress, and right before you go to a 12, I'm going to ask you to come back to a 6. Whenever I'm going to give you a 10 and you're going to freak out, you're going to have a panic attack. Right before we go there, I'm going to teach you how to create a vagal response so that you don't go into a panic attack. You
were just mentioning some of the differences between training men and women. I think that's super interesting, and that's, I think, a cool thing to start off with.
Yeah. Let's offend everybody. I like it.
There's some major differences.
I don't live in the US. I have a French accent. I live in Brazil. I'm allowed to say what I want. I'm just telling you right now. If you lose your YouTube channel again, it's on you, not me.
I like the prerequisite, laying it all down first. You were mentioning that when you've helped women athletes, that they got to win. And when you help men athletes, they got to lose.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So, let's imagine I explain a workout. That's my experience is... the guys are already warming up. I haven't even explained what the workout is, and they're already warming up and doing stuff. And so I wait for them the end of the workout when they failed, they're dead. Half of them hurt somewhere. I'm like, all right, you're going to listen to me now? And they go, yeah, coach. Yeah, okay. For that prior, yeah, whatever. Women, though, they'll wait until I've explained the entire workout very, very clearly up to the rep before they go, okay, so what's the workout again? And then we go through the stuff and everything. It's a completely different approach. And so my wife, I'm her coach, more or less. It's complicated. So I'm her husband first, so I never really tell her I'm her coach because otherwise, when we train together, for example, it's her session. So we had fights about that, which means, no, we're training partners. That's not how this works. So too many times, we ended up being her session. So now we don't train together anymore. Even though we train at home, we train separately because otherwise it's her session, not mine. Yeah. And I'm like, no. So anyway, so welcome to marriage. That's another problem. So I'm not coaching her technically, but we start powerlifting. It's about 3 years ago. I make her do a squat session. So we do, wasn't that much. I was about 100, so 225 for 5 reps and the knee moves on the 5th rep. And that kind of freaks her out and everything. Second set, she does 3 reps and she crumbles. Like she fails the 4th and mentally it's a nightmare. She's like, I don't like powerlifting. She's not feeling well. I'm like, all right, it's not on you, it's on me. It was actually me as a coach, I fucked up. I'm like, all right, I know that one from experience. So a few days later, we do an EMOM. Same weight, so every minute on the minute, same 100 kilos. She does 12 reps total in 12 minutes. And as she went on, the weight moved faster and faster and better because every single time she had 1 rep, that's a win. She had so many seconds to rest before the next rep, that's a win. So what I did is I piled up the wins and that became a great session for her and now she likes to squat. That aspect is something I've seen with almost all women that I coach. Unless they're extremely confident toward the movement, you want to go wins after wins after wins after wins. Guys don't learn shit from winning. We have to lose. Otherwise, Jiu-Jitsu, right? John Machado choked me, I don't know, about 2,853 times before I went like, I get it. I need to protect my neck. I get it. Coach, I'm relaxed now. I totally understand Jiu-Jitsu, right? He had to just, be like, but, like I could do it. No, it's like, no. Choke me. Okay, fine. And then he went on and on and on and on and on like that. So for CrossFit, it was fascinating because you know who uses EMOM the most is CJ from Invictus. Mm-hmm. And especially at the time, he had the strongest women out there. And they were doing high percentages EMOM for 30 minutes. So imagine you do 90% for 30 minutes. I don't know a man that can do that.
That shit's tough.
None of the guys could do it. Only the women could take it. I was like, all right. There's something there. What is this thing that they can do that we cannot? So we are better at higher percentages, but like 90%, they can take an abuse we can't touch.
Some people say that it has to do with like neurological efficiency. Do you agree with that, or you think it's something else going on?
Honestly, I think it's the win thing. Like, if you see the way women are built from almost like I don't want to say biological, it's a physiological part, right? When you look at risk versus reward systems, right? So risk taking, you would call it, or whatever. Women are highly, like whenever you take a risk versus reward, what you gamble, you put weight one way or another toward that. Women push most of the weight toward the consequences of their actions, the risks that they're going to take. Men is mostly like, how do I win? You stick your fingers in the outlet, and by the fourth time, you're like, but maybe this time, right? Hey, maybe I win this time, right? You never know, right? Maybe. Women look at you going, like, you dumb son. Why would you do that? Because I'm not sure. Maybe the fourth, you never know, right? Whereas women put most of the thing on the risk taking, because, by the way, they bear most of the brunt of bad decisions. Wrong dude, ostracized from the tribe, all that. So they're much more on the risk management side of things. So I think there's a greater value for women into winning, whereas there's a greater value on men into losing, in that sense, from a learning behavior perspective. So I think in order to learn, so that doesn't mean necessarily that the physiology is that difference between men and women. There are differences. But I think on a nervous system from a learning behavior, women will learn better through wins, where men don't seem to. I don't know about you guys, but I don't learn shit from winning.
No, I mean, just from experience, jiu-jitsu, et cetera, I've learned the most from stuff that I've lost. So that's where I've made the most changes. Like, I know, exactly. When I've had those losses, I know what I need to change. But when I'm just winning, it's like, it's working. So
let me game this. Now that I'm winning, I'm going to put more of my own instinct into it, and then you're going to get your ass kicked. And go, that was a bad idea.
Exactly.
Women don't look at it like that. They have a completely different learning system based on that. So as much as they are obviously physiological differences, right? I think a lot of it is a learning behavior. Because, I mean, how do you get strong? It takes so long, right? So see the 30-minute imam, every win seems to give them energy. So every rep, and then they can keep going, and then they can, I don't want to say endure, but they can take that abuse because they're winning every time, which seems to allow them to keep going.
You already been in fitness and you've already been training. You've been doing jiu-jitsu for a long time before you ever really ran into CrossFit. Yeah. Did CrossFit surprise you? Like, were you like,
100%.
That doesn't make sense to train for half an hour at 90%, but it's working.
I got into CrossFit and I'm like, why are those women so lean and strong?
Everyone thinks it's drugs.
At the time, it wasn't. Yeah. I don't know how it is now, but I was there at the time, like a Valerie Vobor. By the way, when I was training Valerie, she finished 5th at the CrossFit Games. She's 36 years old. She's a math teacher. Her daughter is 5. Reebok could have milked.
Doesn't mean she's not taking a little bit of testosterone.
Exactly.
And by the way, I wasn't inferring drug use, but I'm saying everyone thinks it's drug use.
No. And maybe
I agree with you though. I don't think there's nearly as many drugs in CrossFit, period, as people think.
I was there when Lauren Fisher was 18 and killing it, and I can guarantee you she wasn't taking anything. Valerie, I was with her all the time. She was not taking drugs. You know how you know is there was no change in their physique.
See if you can bring up Lauren Fisher.
Yeah.
She was unbelievable.
Oh my God.
As a kid.
17 when she finished 9th, I think. Something like that. She was
ridiculous.
But honestly, they were not taking. Again, I don't know the sport anymore. But back then, Anyway, so I get there and they're also lean and strong. At the time, I'm looking at powerlifting, Olympic weightlifting. If you're strong, you're fat. Pretty much, right?
Yeah.
You go to, by the way, I don't know if people remember, but you go to a local powerlifting competition back then. A woman squats 100 kilos. You're like, hey. Yeah, look at her when she's. Is that the early stages?
No, this is pretty recent.
Yeah, this is pretty recent. When she finished 9th, her first CrossFit Games, I believe she was 17, I think, or just turned 18, something like that. And
her brother was a hell of a competitor too.
Oh yeah,
right?
Garrett. Yeah, I trained him too. Yeah.
I think he trained Rick Ross for a little while.
Yeah, he did.
Right?
But the whole family, they're all baseball players and stuff.
He told me some stories. It was wild.
Oh, I would love.
I was like, holy shit, man! I'm like, I don't know if I'd be comfortable in that situation.
Probably not. But it was like early on. So they were all incredible. But I'm like, again, like they're lean. Well, very lean for women, right? Athletes. They're very strong. Like their snatch keeps going up every year. And I'm like, how do you not specialize in Olympic weightlifting and the average snatch of, if you see the 20, 30 competitors goes up every year? I'm like, I don't understand. By the way, that's not true of the men. So again, I go to local. So at the time we had a powerlifting team. A woman who squats 100 kilos, you go like, hey, deadlifts 140 kilos, so 315. You're like, wow, that woman is strong. You go to the CrossFit game, they're all squatting 315. Right, at least. And then they all deadlifting in the usually 365. I'm like, at any powerlifting competition at those weight classes, they would do extremely well. And then they start competing in Olympic weightlifting and they start doing national level. Like I remember Lindsay Valenzuela, she snatched 90 kilos. At the time, for her weight class, this is top 3, if not top 1 in Olympic weightlifting in the US. And she's a CrossFitter going to the CrossFit Games.
Wow.
So we all look like, by the way, back then, first 90 kilo snatch was her in CrossFit. We all went, oh my God, this is amazing. 3 years later, they're all snatching 200 pounds. It's insane. It's crazy. You go like, I don't know. And I'm looking at the training system. So I'm, at Invictus with CJ. And by the way, his volume was not even that high. And to me, it was the craziest shit I've ever seen. It's like, what do you mean you train 3 times a day for a prep at full blast for 20 minutes? I'm like, no, you don't. And I'm there watching them going like, I'm out of breath watching them. I was like, cardio is not good for you, man. Like that can't work. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't understand. And again, it's not working for the men, but for the women, they're killing it. The men are not that strong, but the women, oh my God, their numbers. Like you see.
I know. I see what you're saying. Like in comparison, like a male power lifter, is going to be, way stronger than a male CrossFitter, but a female CrossFitter could potentially match some of the strengths that you see done by females that are drug tested, and or they could switch into weightlifting.
What's her name? You can check. She bench pressed 120 kilos. Like that. I forget her name. Sorry, I'm not in CrossFit anymore. But at the last, there was a bench press. She bench pressed 120 kilos. Yeah. She has a high 300 squats, I know. And I think she's in a 400, low 400 on the deadlift. And she's not big. And by the way, she's very young. So you go like, wait. Like, are we doing something wrong here?
Yeah, these girls taking steroids at 12 years old.
Yeah, it's like,
what's going on?
Are they Chinese or something? Like, I don't understand what's happening. It's a Chinese system. I mean, and then I'm watching my wife and coming from sprinting, and then she starts with CrossFit, and the lifts are going up, and then the thing is going up, and then I'm like, and then I'm trying to go powerlifting, so 2 sets of 5, and that didn't work out at all. So I'm switching to EMOMs because I know that from CJ, and then I see the results in my wife, and I'm like, I need to train women completely differently, volume, but also like what would be for us a mind-breaking volume. That's the biggest difference is we can't take it neurologically. They can. Actually, they thrive on it. Well, that's my wife.
Yeah, some people believe
130 kilo. Yeah, she's so strong.
That's nuts.
She's ridiculous.
Yeah, some people believe that there's that men a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times they're more neurologically efficient. They believe that some women and maybe some undertrained men would be neurologically inefficient, and therefore, if you're neurologically inefficient, you can't like blow your own doors off. Basically, it's hard for you to blow yourself out in a workout.
I would agree or disagree on that. So I think they're right in the fact that in the face of death, we will do that. Because I think in a way, men are expendable in nature. That's our role. I mean, you lose a limb, but you protect your family. So against a bear, we can do it, they cannot. They'll freeze. But in victory, they will be able to go further than us, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, but the problem is you're not going to test that. You're going to test like in the case of like a bear coming at you. Yes, men will be able to be more neurologically advanced than a woman. But I believe it's because we're not testing the proper things, if that makes sense. I believe in a winning situation, I think a man will quit before a woman.
I just basically mean that a male under normal circumstances can usually flex their muscles harder via the strength and the efficiency of the central nervous system.
Oh yeah, okay. So if we look like that, yes. So at higher percentages, we're better. But at 90%, they can kill it.
They can do reps with 90%,
they can do reps,
where we're good for maybe 1 or 2.
Or maybe, let's say 4, right? If the guy is not very, very high level, he can do, let's say, 4 reps. I've seen women do 10.
Yeah, cool. Right. At 90%?
Yeah.
Jeez.
And not only that, they can recover from that. Whereas the guy does 4 reps.
That would destroy me.
I'm dead.
Yeah, the guy does 4 reps.
Thank you. That was cardio. Thank you. I'm not.
He's not doing it for a week or 2 weeks.
Cardio is bad for you. I say it all the time. But 4 reps is almost there. She'll do 10 reps. She'll recover 3 minutes. She'll do it again. And she'll do 8 or 9. It's ridiculous. Mentally, neurologically speaking, they can take that. But that's true that when we translate to a 1 rep max, not even close. Not even close. So they don't have that. So their repetitions that they can do with higher percentages don't match up to their 1 rep max. No. You cannot convert the same way, which I think is also one of the problem of the early programs. For women, they were based on main percentages, and you cannot do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So then suddenly they do 20 reps, you convert, and no, you don't. No, you do not. So it's from that aspect, it's a very different way of training women.
Wow. So let me ask you this. When trying to figure out a 1 rep max for women, because like, for example, if somebody did try to do the 90% of whatever, you could be totally off.
Yeah.
How would you actually truthfully find where her 1 rep max is?
Yeah. So honestly, I didn't rely on percentages. Like, for example, I know based on form, what I mean by that. So I was at first, prior when she was doing 160, so a 365 deadlift, right? She could do 4 or 5 reps. So we go to 385. What I noticed is her form breakdown. But not right away, it's because he got heavier. So the form didn't break down right away. He broke down around 2-3 sessions because she adapted to the weight every session. So she started to move forward more because he was too heavy for her in that sense. So I had to back off, got her back to 160, get her have the right form, and I could train her there, but not heavier. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and based on those numbers, I knew I could add 20 kilo to the lift. But it's exactly when the form starts to break down, I have to stay below that. So I base it on form more than percentages. So I know, for example, if I make her do 180 for 4 with the form that I'm looking for, I know she has 210. Sorry, 420 in pounds. I'm in Brazil, so I forget. So right now she has 170 for 4. So 385. So I gave her 420. I gave her 425 in competition, and she smoked it. So I know she has at least 440. So now when I come back, can I do 180 for 3 or 4 without the form breaking down? So we started. She did 365 for 2, and she smoked it in France. It was no issue whatsoever. Does that mean she's ready for the 180? That's how I'm going to gauge. But we're not going to go past 180 400 pounds no matter what.
Gotcha.
Because if I go higher than that, is that like, then she's losing, if that makes sense. Because then she has adapt to the weight. So if you have to adapt to the weight is winning.
It's interesting when you're able to observe somebody in person versus seeing a video. Yeah. If you see a video of somebody doing a triple, sometimes it doesn't really look that bad. You're like, oh, I think you can handle like another set or something like that. But you don't get to see all the nuances of the shake and the shimmy, and you don't get all the different angles.
And you know, like it's not the same. It doesn't look the same as the last set. The last warm-up set, you go like, oh, now I do never want my athletes to adapt to the weight. It means you're losing.
Adapt to it in what way?
Your form starts to change. Like, by the way, your mental approach is different. You start to not have the same setup, and now your technique is different. Be back off. We do it again. It means you're not ready.
You peel weight off, or you have them move on to something else?
No. I peel weight off. No. I don't want you to finish on a fail like that. So I'm gonna. Oh yeah, that was on 190.
I like that. I think that's one of the more courageous moves someone can make. And I've said it before about super training. When I had a group of, when I had a powerlifting team, some of the strongest things I've ever seen anybody do was actually just take weight off the bar. Because it takes a lot of courage to do that. And to finish out your sets with like, kind of your tail between your legs a little bit.
Trust in the coach, trust in the program, right? Knowing that it's going to pay off. So that's where she trusts me on this, because she's seen the progress. So you might not be able to do that right away with a new athlete, by the way. But for me, the point was, no, you didn't lift the weight. Like that's not your form on the sumo, so that's not your sumo. So no, you didn't. You didn't sumo, you did something else, right? You lean forward. It just doesn't matter. That's my coach, Sam Alduenda, who was a Masters world champion. He was my coach for 5 years. And him, if you flinched on the squat, first of all, he tore you a new one. And I would hear about it forever. But it's like, you take the weight down and don't you dare flinch. He was 15 times national champion, twice world champion. In front of me, at 70 years old, he did 440 for 4 reps. He weighs 165.
At 70 years old?
In front of me, I have the video somewhere. Over 400 pounds for 4 reps sumo. And he had gorgeous sumo. He had the perfect set of hair. Like a white set of hair, like Mexican. I mean, like, but he's like super short, 160 pounds, but the hair was perfect. And in the meantime, that like at least 400 pounds for 4 reps, perfect form. He's 70 years old. He squatted 315 for reps in front of me at 17. Yeah, at 70. Yeah. Oh, yeah. At his best, he benched 365, double body weight, over double body weight. Yeah. Anyway, so his thing was the squat, right? And you took it down the same way you took down an empty barbell, like Captain Kirk was saying, and don't you dare flinch. Oh, he was ruthless on that. So otherwise the weight wins. So I took that too hard. It's like, no. Your form is the same always. Otherwise, no.
Did that original coach, did he know like the X's and O's? Did he know the technical stuff, or he just knew like a particular style and way that he learned?
No, he just started to train with, oh my God.
He wasn't telling you about like torque and torsion and how to twist your feet and move your body.
He was all about setup and mindset on the squat. It was like, don't be a pussy, take the weight down, go back up. I was like, I like that. Simple, easy to remember, I'll do that. Then I got crushed. I was like, it's not working. It's like, yeah, but it's you. You're the problem. All right, let me work harder on this then. And that was that every time. And so, no, I mean, he, adjusted the stance a bit. He had a very good eye for that because he coached a lot. But there was nothing technical about it. It was all the squat, the sumo, deadlift like this. But 5 years, he taught me, I had a very good morning when I met him, and then he turned it into a squat. And I got a lot better. I mean, it was like, well, I can make you strong because looking at how you squat 315, I can't good morning like that. So you probably have a strong back. We can use it. I was like, oh, thank you, sir. By the way, I didn't know who he was. So I have a gym in PV, in Palos Verdes, and the guy comes in. Remember those bright yellow sweatshirt from the Gold Gym, cut out at the neck, with the tank top? Remember those? And of course, obviously the sweatpants.
The baggy pants, yeah.
And he has a big upper body, but he has no legs.
Bum equipment. See if you can find bum equipment.
Oh my God. He has legs. I mean, I don't have legs, but he has less legs than me, which is, I didn't know you could do. So I felt very proud. I felt very comfortable right away. It's like, hey, there's a guy who has less legs than me. So I don't feel offended right away. It's like, I like you already, sir. Know what I mean? It's like, I can squat a lot. I'm like, I have hope. Oh my God, this is amazing. Anyway, so he comes in and I'm like, I can help you with the squat. And I'm like, well, that's good because I need help. But at the same time, it's like, that's old bodybuilder shows up and I'm like, yes, sir. But my grandmother told me, be respectful to your elders. So I'm like, sir, please show me. And everything is like, oh no, the bright yellow one. You know, like cut out at the neck that says Gold Gym. Like like slightly high on the belly too.
Okay, yeah.
That's a different kind of jacket, but that looks cool.
It's old school. Look, I like it. I like old school, obviously. And he's like, I'm going to help you. That's when I do a squat. You say, this is a good morning. Let me help you. Then he comes back the next week, and every time he's correcting a little bit. I'm like, you seem to be really good at this. By the way, everybody in the gym is like, tell that old bodybuilder to fuck off. I'm like, just be respectful, dude. You don't know. Plus, he seems to be fairly good. By the fourth session, I'm like, all right, who are you? Because that shit makes a lot of sense and you seem to be really good. Oh yeah, so my name is Sam Alduenda. And I was like, I remember saying name from somewhere. Yeah, he was a friend with, I suck with him, one of the greatest American powerlifters of all time.
Ed Cohn? Ed Cohn?
No, not the greatest. One of the greatest, the one right below. He was even about the height of, you know who I'm talking about. Are
you talking about like Franco Colombo maybe?
No. Okay. Like a real powerlifter, like multiple world champion.
Shit.
It was the same height as Ed Cohn. They almost
Bridges, like Jeff.
Yes.
Right, Mike Bridges.
He was best friend with Mike Bridges. They trained together.
Mike Bridges dominated powerlifting for many years, and he was before Ed Cohn.
Yeah.
He was lighter than Ed Cohn, and he had the highest total in the history of powerlifting, being a guy who weighed like 181 or 198. So he
short, by the way.
He was stronger than the strongest heavyweight at the time.
Yeah.
Whoa.
But his hips,
it was wild.
He's a block.
Yeah.
So he was best friend with Sam. So I got to meet him. Nicest guy, by the way. Nicest guy. He went into CrossFit. He competed at the CrossFit Masters, 45, 50 at the time, whatever he was. So the announcer had no idea who he was. So here he comes, he takes 400 pounds or 500 and smokes everybody. He's like, oh, that guy can deadlift. I was like, yes, that guy can deadlift. Thank you. Anyway, I thought it was funny. But yeah, he was best friend with Mike Bridges. So yeah, he trained like, and so I'm like, that's where I knew the name from. And so I Googled him, and then from 50 to 65, he won the national every year. Damn. Then went to Worlds and won it twice. He had a 550, so a single ply at a time. At 63, was when he was at his strongest. He had a 550 squat. 515 squat, 550 deadlift, and 365 bench.
Damn.
So, and he could bench press 330 raw. Wow. Which is crazy, right? At 63.
How did you end up becoming like what's your story? How did you become like this sophisticated coach? Because, you got the tattoos and you told us about how long you've been
French.
And you told us how long you've been doing jiu-jitsu for.
Yeah. Since the 90s, by the way, guys. I don't know if that was mentioned, but
since the 90s.
First, I'm 47. Let's all agree on that. I identify as a 47 for the last 3 years. I'm allowed to do that now, so I'm very happy.
But I think it's interesting because you're somebody that it seems like a practical in-person coach that has worked with a lot of people. But you're also like in a lab, like running tests at UCLA to try to figure out like lactate and thresholds and all these other things.
Actually, autism and PTSD, believe it or not.
And a lot of that stuff
lactate,
as well.
I do it on the side just for fun. But it's because I'm very autistic, that's why. But I'll explain. But I grew up in sports. So I've been at a national level at a sport since I'm 9 years old, I think. I started with soccer. Yeah. I was supposed to go to the European Cup of 10-year-olds, believe it or not. Yeah. Then I went into swimming, became state champion in that. I did like all sports. I was always into sports. I found that I was better at coaching than competing, actually. I found that through Jiu-Jitsu. But I was always in sport. That's all I wanted to do. And so I went into that. And it turned out also... So on what side was that? On the other side, you have to understand, I finished reading Freud, like all of his work by the time I was 17.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So I read like Nietzsche by the time I was 19. I was always into that. So I read all the classics very early. I read a lot. So, but that's the autism part.
What made you attracted to that, you think? Attracted to that kind of literature?
Right. So pattern-based. So you know what a savant is? Mm-hmm. Right. So most people think a savant will look at something and figure out patterns. Actually, it's a bit more complex than that. The key is you're very good at finishing incomplete patterns. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So critical thinking becomes a very important part of that. So you can start to put the patterns together to get better at what is it that you do intrinsically. So what interested me from the beginning was the critical thinking. So I read all the Greeks, the Romans, Seneca by the time I was 15, because it was the right way to deal with patterns. That
I wish I was keen to that stuff when I was that young. I don't know if I would have read it though.
I also had my grandmother who just taught me to read, not ABC, but like taught me to read like from a very early age and everything. So it was a mix of me being naturally attracted to that and having my grandmother, my family in the back help me. It was a very classical education because that's when you come from a certain family, that's what you do. So the two together was the thing. But my stuff was sports first, always. So I went into athletics, I started jiu-jitsu, I did all that. And I found coaching, moved to the US and found like strength sports, like strongman. I'm not good at powerlifting, but I was pretty good at strongman. But in the back of my mind was always the other stuff that I kept reading, I kept studying because that's what I do all the time. So I'm on the savant side. So the different types of autism. You have the Asperger, what they used to call Asperger. You have the savant type. It's complex, but most people see autism as what they call ASD, the disorder part. But there's also a learning process. There's a function to autism. What you see at ASD is a syndrome applied to a function. Any function taken too far is a disorder. Mm-hmm. Hunger, thirst, whatever. If you take it too far, it becomes a disorder. The problem is that autism is first a function, but you don't necessarily see it because Elon Musk, people like that, they have a keen eye for specific patterns. So it's a learning behavior that is slightly different. Right? And taken too far can lead to very dark places. That's what you see with ASD and all that stuff. But at first, it's a specific learning behavior. So mine is I'm very good at visual, so I can put everything in shape, and I'm very good with letters, so I get to do both. So I take studies, and then I'll put them into a shape, and then I'll figure out the incomplete pattern. Then I put it in a mental palace in my third room stored somewhere, and I can always access it.
What's the bad part?
So...
For you,
what
this
you man just
do.
said mental palace, by the way. Like we're skipping over that. You said you put that into a mental palace and you can just retrieve that whenever.
So it's called the Greeks call that a mnemonic palace, where that's how they went into library that they created mentally to take things to remember. Have you ever seen the people that compete in memory games?
Yes.
And they build stories like the Sasquatch as a tale. Yeah, okay. So me, it's a slightly different thing. So I have, there's a palace. So I enter, there's a wooden door, right? And I'm going to take the stairs on the left. Doesn't have to make sense. That's just the way it is. So you have to get to a stage where you can feel the door in your fingers when you open the door. So the door, is it wood, metal? Is it wood? The handle? How is the handle? So all this you start to create, right? Then I take the stairs on the left and there are different rooms there. The third room is where I store specific things. The first one is where I study in a way. And I have a room where when there's a problem I can't figure out, I write it on the board and I let it there until it's solved. And then when I come back at some point, it's solved. I just have to read it. So I don't know where it is. I just know it's there.
And I'm not going to ask about the shed of the basement.
But curious, how old were you when you first off realized that was a way of doing things, or did you learn that you could do things like that?
No, it was always there.
It was always
that's how I learned.
There.
Yeah,
okay,
that's how I learned. I can't remember shit. I suck with names. My dating memory is horrible. But I remember, I don't remember every study I read. I just know the study. It's very hard to explain. When it applies, I remember it. Does that make sense?
Yes. You're probably wondering, why am I wearing these glasses? Well, it's because I'm being bathed in blue light. And blue light isn't necessarily bad. There's blue light in the sun. But if you're in your office, if you're indoors, if you're in front of a screen during the daytime, it's not a great idea to have your eyes being bathed by blue light all day long. That's why EMR Tech, a company that we've partnered with, has blue light daytime glasses and blue light blocking evening glasses. These glasses right here are meant for you to wear during the daytime when you're in front of screens, etc. But if you're outside, take the glasses off and get the natural sunlight. And if you're at home in the evening when sun sets and you need to be in front of the TV or you need to be in front of your computer or on your phone, these glasses are the ones to get. They also have the best red light therapy devices on the market. If you stand in front of any of EMR Tech's red light therapy devices, you will actually feel how much stronger the output of the red light is on those devices versus any of the competitors. They also have some of their smaller red light devices like their Fire Wave, Fire Dragon, and Fire Storm. And then if you want to get some of their bigger panels, they have their Fire Hawk, which is their biggest panel, and the Inferno panel. These are literally the best red light therapy devices on the market. And if you want to save on them, Andrew, how can they do that?
Yes, you got to head over to emrtech.com. That's emr-tech.com. And at checkout, enter promo code PowerProject to save 20% off your entire order. Again, that's emrtech.com, promo code PowerProject. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
So how did you find out that you were autistic?
By reading, by studying it. I was like, hey, I do that.
They're talking about me.
I do that one. Oh, so there's a very famous guy in that world that studies out of Canada, out of Montreal. And he wrote entire things on for example, the standard on the savant, and he had a great paper on that and the purpose, the function of autism. And he was explaining what a savant is. Every single thing he was lining up, I was like, ooh, imprinting at 8 among specific things. What you're good at versus not, how this works. So, for example, there's a key sign of a difference between a savant and a genius. A genius is Albert Einstein. He had an idea, he proved it through math, went like this. Mm-hmm. A savant is Ramanujan.
God, I wish I could talk like you.
The accent?
Amazing.
The French accent? He works with women, I got to tell you. How do you think I got that one?
It's working on me.
Yeah. How do you think I got that one? He worked really well. By the way, I lie, I'm from Detroit. But he works so well with women that I keep the French accent, so now I can't lose it, that's all.
8 Mile, you must know that well.
I watched it many times. Anyway. So Ramanujan was the Indian guy. I don't know if you know the story.
I don't.
Did you see Good Will Hunting?
Yes, I have.
It's based on that. Anyway, So Ramanujan is an Indian guy who, when he was young, found a high school level of mathematics book, right? And he reads that and he composes 300 theorems of mathematics, right? His thing was prime numbers. And then he sends it to, I think it was Oxford. Cambridge? Okay, I think Oxford. Anyway, we're talking 19th century. And the guy reads it, and first of all, half of those theorems already exist. So the guy basically, Wow. And then the other 150 is like, what the fuck is that? Through his life, he composed about 3,000 of them. Less than 10% were wrong. I think less than 1% were wrong of his stuff. So to this day, we're still trying to prove some of them. Anyway, the guy sees him and goes like, brings him from India to England and makes him work with him and everything. And they compose some gorgeous theorems of mostly prime numbers. Mm-hmm. But when he was asked, how do you get to that answer? It said that his local deity gave him the answer. So that's a hallmark of savants. They cannot tell you how they get to an answer. They just know it. So I understand what he means by a deity because I always know when I'm right. It's a feeling.
Yeah.
And like, oh, that's correct. A right pattern gives me a specific feeling. Like, I know I'm right. But prove it. I was like, no, look, so I can, but I'll take 5 studies, put them in front of you. So look, that one says that one says this, it connects. And then if you connect this to that one, that you connect to this, that you connect to that, you get, and then see, I'm right. Mm-hmm. And you go like, what the fuck you mean? No, but I swear. So I have the time is that. So how did I end up at UCLA? Because we have a gym with my partner in LA where I created a system for the nervous system and everything. And he asked me to apply it to autism. I was like, yeah, so I know autism very well, obviously. So I was like, all right, let me apply it to this. And then we developed an entire system of training resilience in those kids, nervous system resilience, in order to have a better handle on the symptoms of autism, which is really the issue. So ASD, the problem is a disorder. So how do you help with the disorder? You help with the symptoms of the disorder. Aggressive behavior, interoception is a problem. Anyway, there's a bunch of things like that. Right? So I applied the system. And one of his clients was Dr. Nasser Hamadi, who's a very famous child psychiatrist at UCLA. His daughter is autistic. So he comes and he goes like, all right, you had better results to your stuff than UCLA did with my daughter. Why?
Wow.
You have to understand, UCLA is the leading center for autism in the world to this day. ABA, the number one behavior therapy, was created at UCLA. So he's there, and we do better than so he's like, all right, why? I don't understand. So he's like, all right, you need to talk to my partner, Julian. So I come to LA, I meet him, and we're talking basically psychiatrist. I wanted to be a psychiatrist. I just couldn't, I suck at school for obvious reasons. And so I couldn't go through the med school system. So I just studied on the side just to do it myself. So then we start talking. It's like, oh, we need to work together. And so I started to explain my theories about where autism was and everything. And from there, it was like, it's funny because I do the same thing you do, but me from the world's perspective. I build resilience through what is called positive reinforcement, where I was doing it through movement to affect the nervous system, but obviously he's doing it from the other side. And so we started to work together. I was like, all right, so let's have a study and prove that this works. So we did a proof of concept study already last year. And the results on the parasympathetic-sympathetic ratio on a PTSD was off the hook. So then
on PTSD, not on autism.
But it applies in a way the same way. It's the same idea applied slightly differently. But if you go first principles, the originals, like all principles can be applied to everything. We just applied it to PTSD and autism. And we saw on PTSD, stuff where you go like, like with this is a cognitive behavior therapy we can create out of that for psychiatry, not for fitness, for psychiatry. And so then the studies we're doing right now is to create a new cognitive behavior therapy that could be applied by psychiatrists. So where this is interesting is this would be the first time psychiatrists don't look at us like morons, like we're retarded, and actually understand that we can work together because through exercise and control of variables, we can affect the nervous system in a way that does not have to rely on drugs. We all know exercise works on depression, just as works as drugs, but we can't work together. This would be the first time actually we have the psychiatry side on one side and the movement on the other in order to influence the resilience of the nervous system, which is where most symptoms fail. You met anxious people.
Yeah.
An anxious person will always be anxious. That's okay. And you don't have, this is good. It can drive you to do more and everything. But the real problem is when they start crashing from that, falling into depression, falling into panic attacks. But the problem is not the anxiety. The anxiety as a function. It prepares you for the future. You're never anxious about things in the past, only the future. So it prepares you for something. But when you fall into panic attack, that's a problem. So really what happened is life gave you a 6 and your answer was a 12. Yeah. Right? So I don't want, if life gives you a 6, I want a 6. I can have a 7, but I want to start to have 9. By the way, it's not a 2 either. That would be depression, right? So the key is like, all right, so how do we work at a 6 when life gives me a 6? So the problem is not because you cannot change the world, right? Is your answer to the stress. But that's resilience. Resilience is 7 times down, 8 times up. So life gives me a 6, I give a 6. I give an 8, I have to learn to come back to a 6. I give a 4, I have to learn to come back to a 6. So every time I need to get back up, and my reaction has to adjust to what the world is giving me.
Got it.
Too many people look inside and go, I am there. It's like, yeah, but I don't care. Life is 6.
These numbers that you're pulling out, are you saying like they're out of 10?
Yes.
Basically.
Out of 10.
And if somebody is like always trying to have a 10, that might cause anxiety too, right?
But there will be anxiety because like, what if life gives you a 2? You still give me a 10, right? So you're always in an expenditure of energy that has no justification. Remember, your system can see the outside. Right. So your system knows there is no need for that 10.
You wanted to go for a bike ride and it's pouring rain outside. It kind of changes the mood, right? It changes.
Right, well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then you start freaking out because you're like, yeah, but I don't want it to be raining. So now you're in full-blown panic attack. You go like, yeah, 6, it's raining. But by the way, it's not that bad either. Anyway, so the problem is a reaction to the stress. So what I mean by that is you get into an altercation and some people, by being at 10 all the time, now to think it's a bear coming at them. But it's not. We're just talking. Just relax for a second. So now, once you do that, every response is a 10. So that means that the door isn't closed properly, you give me a 10. Imagine the amount of energy you're spending. At some point or another, the system is going to go like, we cannot sustain that amount of energy spent out of every single thing in life. So you know what the system will go down? It will shut down everything. And now you're in a freeze mode, depression. That's a polyvagal theory. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. So it's always like, you have to remember that the environment exists. So it's a prediction versus observation model. I would have to go into Carl Friston, so we're going into much more advanced things. But it's always prediction versus observation. It's what you think is going to happen versus what the world tells you is happening. And there's always a gap between the two. And the point of the system is to make that gap as small as possible so you get better at predicting what's coming next, which is a learning system, which is a defense mechanism. Right?
So I'm curious, like when it comes to, you're working with some of these individuals and everybody has a different level that they deal with things, right? But what does it look like? Does it look like, do they do certain types of exercises to prepare themselves for the day? Do they do things when something happens? So I need to backtrack a little bit and explain what the system is. Okay.
So we can go as deep into this as you guys want. It's fairly complex. So I have to, don't kill me out there. I'm going to have to oversimplify a little bit. Okay. If it gets boring, tell me, because I get launched into those things. And like, if my wife was here, you would look at her face, she'd be like, oh my God, here it goes again. That's her life. 6 a.m, I get my coffee. Honey, I thought about something. So, and when she hears so, she's like, oh shit. And you know what I noticed now? She shuts down for the whatever 10 minutes I'm going to talk, and she wakes up for the last 30 seconds, and she goes, so you said that word, that she repeats the last 3 words, and I think she was listening, so I'm all happy. And she does that, I've noticed. And I'm like, you're getting smart. She's like, no, I just know how to win. You know what I mean? Like, women know how to win.
Hey,
anyway.
I don't know how old you said you were, because you said you were 47 for the last couple of years, but your wife certainly isn't 47. No, so congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah. And she's hot too. French accent, I'm just saying. Anyway,
that's what I was implying.
Guys, if you want to know how to do it, just text me.
You were talking about how gorgeous she was when she came through. I was like, she looks like a model.
Yeah.
Fucking A.
For a strong one too.
Great job.
Yeah.
So I have an alpha male camp for 14,000 a month. That's how I'm going to make money. Anyway, longer story. So there's a guy named Carl Friston, who's one of the greatest genius we have that no one knows about, amazingly. In 2007, he came out with something called the free energy principle. It's an extremely important part of literature, because what he was saying is life is predictive, not reactive. So this is important. We used to think the brain basically was just capturing data, analyzing it, and reacting based on that. Turns out that's not how this works. It's the system, and it can be a cell all the way to a human being, will predict what happened next. Temperature of the room, wind, whatever happens. We're talking milliseconds, by the way, all the way to hours, but even on a millisecond level. So this is why when you sit up, you can stand up and not pass out. Because there was a prediction based on the blood pressure that you need to maintain. Right. So the body does that continuously every 10th of a milliseconds. Right. So the body is always predictive turns out for everything. So we saw that on the cell level. And the free energy principle is equal actually as a mathematical equation as to life does that obeys the laws of probability mathematics. So that means that, like a cell, basically, the membrane of the cell is like a Markov blanket, which means the world knows about the cell through the membrane, and the cell knows about the world through the membrane. So it's an exchange of information between the membrane and the world that defines that. So, but there's always a prediction made versus an observation, which is I get data from the environment, right? So there's always a gap between those two, right? So that's called a somatic error, right? The body, the point of the learning system is to make that somatic error smaller. Why? Because you get better at surviving. And then through evolution, every time the system gets stronger and stronger and better and better and better, right? So once you try to fix that error, that's called a prior. It's like a memory of an event that you try to keep inside so that you can use what you learned from prior for the next one. So that's why they call it a prior, right? So the idea with autism is that prior is very small. There's less weight associated with the memory of the previous event.
Okay.
That makes sense. So that's called a hypo-prior. Schizophrenia would be a hyper-prior, which means you put a lot of weight based on what happened next. So if you were to push that system, you could actually end up with a positive symptom where you think George V told you to go hunt dragons because you build up upon a memory, and now you start to create an entire delusional system. Yeah. So not to get complicated, but basically the autism would be the opposite of schizophrenia. That's another thing I'm working on. Anyway, so that means that autism, most of the weight would be based on data collection, on the observation part. Right. So imagine if you have a nervous system that is really, really good at gathering data, that it'd be very easy to overwhelm. So texture would be a problem. Because now if I have the wrong texture, it's yelling at me, screaming in my ear, look, to the point where you can't do anything else. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem. That's too much energy spent. Smell. And you go on and on and on and on like that. So that means that I would have to build a resiliency of your capacity to handle data in order for that not to intervene into your own reactions. So that's what the system was based on. So what I do is I'm going to make them push the system through training a specific way so that they learn to get back up whenever they fall. Because otherwise, any stress happens, they freak out and they have a very physical reaction. They have very low impulse control because the prediction system is so weak.
Now, in terms of building resiliency, in terms of like what other people may do other people do things outside of exercise to try to build resiliency with?
That's always the key. But there's issues with, so since you're on the, for example, there's a low oxytocin level and I think higher vasopressin level with autism, things like that. So it seems almost like it's a, like there's types of humans and autism is a type. So there's things associated with that. And socialization is always a massive issue within autism. But that's also, look at it this way. If you wanted to be really good at one thing, you would have a system that allows you to focus on one thing 16 hours a day. And I'm sorry, but bitches are a distraction.
Yeah.
So, right. So usually what we see with autism is usually they have one mate for life. If they hook very, very strong. But it's not their family. It's always an outside source, which would make more sense, right? So you see people that are low on socialization that can be really good at one thing. And so the coders at Google, where they can just do that shit for 16 hours a day. Yeah. And by the way, they love it. Right. So in a society that imposes other things, you could see how we could get overwhelming very fast. So you see those kids with one t-shirt, one type of food that they eat, they get really good at one thing and that's all they do. Right. You can understand that socially that's going to cause issues, right?
Yeah.
So, and they have very low impulse control. So the exercise is just to teach them resiliency, right? But you try to do that with languages, you try to do that with other things. I find exercises to be the best because I can, not attack, but I can go at the system directly.
Yeah.
Without having social problem in the middle. Every time you go through socialization, you're hitting a wall. So if you start to try to teach them word, it's like, why? So abstract is a problem with autism. So when I train them, I have what I call a WEST scale, which is low weight bearing on the scale, on the spine, low skill, low eccentric, so that I can push the intensity. Because the second something gets in the way, and the abstract level. So what is the best way? A sled. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's nothing abstract with the sled. If I say it's 15 reps on the squat, I quit at 14, I've reached failure at 14. Did I win or lose?
Probably feels like you lost.
Well, no matter what, you're asking the question. Now you lost the intensity already. Whereas a sled, there's a distance. I just tell them reach that spot and then they can reach 100% intensity, which allows me to build resilience. Whereas if I say 5 reps, so instead of doing 5 reps, I put chairs and I make them squat in each chair. One time. So then they just sit down, just go back up. And I do that 5 times. And then they can achieve intensity. Otherwise, the mind always gets in the way.
Yeah.
So that's how I build resilience on the nervous system. And so once they get better at handling the data, they'll have lesser reactions to that overwhelming feeling. So for example, we see less physical episodes with their parents, something you see a lot, unfortunately, things like that. So we're dealing at the disorder in the sense of by building resiliency, we see less bad, whatever that means, episodes. And so training is the best way to do it.
Is there a way to, I'll say, get reps in for somebody? Like, let's say an event happens that requires a 4, a 5, but they always come in at a 10. Is there anything that somebody that is continuously doing that, is there something that like you've been able to help guide to say, hey, this is a 4, this requires 4 energy?
Great question. Yes. And that's what I call the Q-1. So the Q-1 was quit -1. So what we do is we'll go on, I do that for the PTSD a lot. We'll go on an Airdyne, and you guys can try if you want. And we're going to go at a certain number where you start, you know that moment where you go like, if I do 10 minutes of that, this is going to hurt, right? Yes. And you know, like, so your mind starts to go into that other phase, right? I call that the quit phase, when the voice is telling you, dude, I ain't going to work. Like, okay. So then you have two ways of answering that. You can go like, cocaine, let's do this, right? Or you kind of shut down and you go slower than that, right? So that, I'll call that the cue. We're going to go right below that, right under that voice, and you're going to stay there. And within 3-4 minutes, you're going to have to deal with the mid-level stress that you don't know how to react to. So that's a life giving you a 6. I'm going to put the stuff at 6, and I'm going to make you stay at that number. And it's either 3 minutes in, 6 minutes in, or 8 minutes in, you're going to have a reaction. The question is, are you going up or down? If you go up, you're anxious. If you go down, you're more depressed. But I'm going to ask you to stay at the same number and spend the least amount of energy possible staying at that number. I'm training your nervous system to answer with a 6 to a 6. The good news is once you're there, your mental and your physical are at the same level of stress. So now they can talk to each other. So now you're dealing with your own stuff. So we call that the Q-1. It's one of the main weapons that I have.
Am I incorrect in assuming that this is also where kind of like an individual's ability to tolerate lactate comes in?
Lactate is a bit higher than that because we're right below that.
Okay.
Because lactate is, we're going to see that lactate also is produced whenever that voice starts talking. Mm-hmm. That's when the lactate is going to go up. So as you push that voice further or higher number, you'll see that the lactate will take longer to go up. They tell you it's a physiological reaction because you're being trained physically, which is true partly, but I also think it's teaching the nervous system to delay that moment where you need that extra energy.
Yeah, because if you were to tell me, hey, like, let's just jump on the assault bike, like, oh, what are we going to do? Like, oh, just get on there. I'll be, all right, cool. But then if you were to say, we're going to be on here for 15 minutes, I would already start trying to figure out how to get out of it.
Right, exactly. But so that's where I'm going to keep you. So you can do 50 minutes if I put you at a 10 RPM.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Right, okay. What about 12?
Yeah.
Is that too fast?
I don't know. I can't even compute that, what that would even look like.
12 RPM is really slow, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You're barely
Just
moving.
making sure.
Can you sit on it for 15 minutes and not do anything?
Right, yeah.
Right, so let's go move very slowly. You can do that. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's keep going until we find that moment where like, dude, I'm freaking out. We go under that, and now we're going to stay there. That's exposure therapy.
That's awesome. Okay.
But from a physical perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I've been doing with the 8-minute run. You know, I'll just go out and do an 8-minute run. Mm-hmm. There's no warm up. There's no real expectation, but more often than not, I get midway through it. I get past the warm up phase. I get past the conversation.
Exactly. Right.
And once I get past that little conversation of like, should you quit? Should you do something different for today?
Exactly.
I ride out the last couple minutes. It's not that bad. It's done. And my mood is completely different. So everything's flipped upside down.
You're at 8 minutes. I told you it's 3, 6, or 8.
Yeah.
Everybody's the same way. It's 3, 6, or 8. So some people do that at 3. Some do it at 6. Some do it at 8. It's funny. You see it all the time. So we're on 8. I'm on 8 as well, by the way.
Yeah, in a 3-minute, like if you just said to Andrew, said, you know, do 300 watts for 3 minutes or something like that. It's going to be a little challenging, but it's not going to be awful.
But it doesn't matter. We're going to go until we see the reaction.
Right.
And so after a while, you'll know. By the way, that's one of the things.
So he might hit 3 minutes. He might say, hey, we got to go 3 more minutes because you didn't get the response that you're looking for.
Right. I need long enough to create that response, but then teach him not to quit. Because the problem is not the quitting. The problem is you learn to answer way too high. So that's a panic attack you're getting yourself. Right. So we're going to go right below. So you're never there, but I'm still going to make it uncomfortable. So what you're going to learn is to give me a 6 when I give you a 6 instead of giving me a 12.
This is what CrossFitters are great at, right? Like top elite level CrossFitters, they're great at like, you know, there's this long effort and they're great at pacing themselves through that effort.
Right. They know exactly the number and stuff like that. And so, but it can be very uncomfortable mentally. Mm-hmm. That's why right away you're like, I can't do that. No, you can. We just have to do it correctly. But the key is to teach you resilience. Right. So it can't be too low because then it's weak, it doesn't do anything, but it can't be too high because then you have a panic attack. So it's a bit like a vaccine, right? Vaccine is too weak, you don't get anything. It's too strong, you get sick. Depending on the vaccine. Anyway, I'm not going there. You can keep your podcast for now. So it's Jordan Peterson who had people that could not go to a party. So he was teaching them to shake hands. Why? Because going to a party that's way too much, right? So so how do you go to a party anyway? You're going to have to introduce yourself. All right, so that's a problem. So how do you introduce yourself? Well, you're going to have to learn to shake hands because otherwise other men are going to judge you. All right, so first you're going to shake my hand and I'm going to teach you to, and then you're going to build confidence from there. And then from there, you're going to go to a party, shake one hand and leave. And then. So it's called exposure therapy, which is, by the way, called linear progression.
Atomic Habits, the book that we reference all the time. The guy mentions hey, just to go on a walk, you have a lot of anxiety about going outside. You've been depressed for a long time. He's like, maybe all you do for that day is put your shoes on and literally walk outside and then walk your ass back inside, take the shoes off. And
100%.
That's day one.
It's exposure therapy 101. It's the best way to do. Everything is exposure therapy, whether it's training. I don't care what it is you do, it's exposure therapy. Problem is the 12 means you just jumped in it. I'm going to do 10 minutes. Yeah, but not at 62 RPM. You're going to do maybe at 42. They're like, I can do that. That's easy. All right, why don't we do that? And then either 3, 6, or 8, there's going to be a reaction. That reaction tells you if you're anxious or more on the depressed side. And I want you to not agree with that reaction and go back to a 6. Because guess what? Life is a 6 or whatever it is. But that's what you're going to base your reaction on your environment. Because remember, it's prediction versus observation. It's not, if you stay based on prediction, you're in a schizophrenic type disorder. What I want you is to answer to the environment. Because, so based is you, but there's also where are you? So, there is no truth without context. Right, that's what you see, right? You see conversations on YouTube that are always out of context. Yeah, and then you can say whatever the fuck you want. Yeah. Right, but if you're within a context, so people say you can measure happy. That's not true. We do it in neuroscience all the time. But what are you happy about? Your spouse? Your training? Yeah, that we can measure. We can see the signs and everything. But when you say, are you happy? It doesn't make sense because there's no context. So there is no emotion. There is no system without context. There is no truth without context. That's epistemology 101. So what is the context? You always have to answer to a context. There is nothing exists in the human system without context. No emotion, nothing. So every time we're going to put it back into context. So I'm creating the context with the airline of a stress. So I want your physical stress to equal your mental stress. So even if you're stressed out that day, I might push it. But I want the two to be able to communicate with each other. Because remember, if everything is prediction, observation, for the somatic error to be low, they have to be matching. So that probably, we see that that's the only moment where you can actually deal with your own anxiety is when the two are matching.
So you mentioned helping people with PTSD and autism through some of these endurance movements, but you're also doing it with like power lifts and strength stuff as well, explosive.
Low weight. So it's not powerlifting because there's too much skill involved, but I use a sled a lot. So for example, I make them pull a rope because I need it to have a beginning and an end, not based on reps. So I find that carries work better. So we make them do sandbag carries. Like this I think it's on my Instagram, we have one of the kids who carried like a 200-pound sandbag. So for example, with autism, they cannot jump. There's a problem with eccentric and loading. And we had one of the kids doing like a 30 inches jump, which is totally not possible. But that took forever, but we get there. Yeah, it's a problem with eccentric. That's actually
we had a kid in our gym that we had for a few years. And he ended up working up to being able to jump. And it was like his favorite thing to do.
Yeah, it's very hard.
He ended up really liking it a lot, but he did a lot of sled work.
Yeah.
We tried to have him squat and stuff, and it was like
the skill won't work.
From one rep to the next, and then from 1 week to the next, it was like, okay, that's not working.
But
like
you see on the sled right away, it's
there.
like, I get it. Because there's a visual component to it where the system is like, it's there, I come here, it makes sense.
And he could feel it, and then he could understand. Like
most of my work is on the sled, even me. That's why I don't do well with powerlifting.
Do you think that for some of these individuals, it's like, do you think it's helping with the connectivity or the activity to the brain or something in some way?
Yes, because I think...
Like communication to
look at it this way. This is the only thing that makes sense. There's a line. I crossed it. That makes sense.
Yeah, there's the quote, pain is the only thing that's real, right? So maybe this this weight or however you want to word it.
And what works really well is a sandbag. Because there's a connection to the body. So remember, like a lot of people can train through their head. By definition, in autism, you have to train through your body. So you have to feel the weight, you have to feel the thing. So when they have a sandbag here, the connection to the thing seems to work better. A sled, you can see it, you push it, you know where it goes. It makes sense, right? So the system can push. And so the reason I make them do that is because I need you to sometimes to get to a 10, So you learn to come back from it. Because otherwise, when life gives you a 10, you can't give me an answer. So remember, we're talking about autistic kids that are being downregulated all day, every day, and usually through drugs. Right.
Yeah.
So they never go up. So what happens when life gives them an up? Then they blow a casket.
I see. So like there's so many times over and over again, their behavior is quote unquote wrong or inappropriate for a lot of the moments that they're dealing with at the
And what if,
time.
Okay, so let me introduce an idea, right? This I haven't proven yet because that's going to be one of the testing I want to do. So you guys know about oxytocin.
Yeah.
Can you explain it?
Right.
Hormone,
So
right?
oxytocin is a hormone, right? That is basically a social bonding agent, right? How do you produce it during sexual orgasm and, for example, breastfeeding? Right. So how does that work for men? How do we connect between men? I'm just saying, that's kind of an issue, right?
Yeah.
Don't look at me like that. I have a French accent, but don't look at me like that. I'm married, dude, sorry.
Autism is
It's
mostly,
very low on oxytocin. for
It's
example.
mostly men though, right?
Yes. So we're going to get to that. So look at male bonding, right? And so there is something called vasopressin, whatever, which is very close to oxytocin. It's almost 2 amino acids, but it's basically the same molecule. But vasopressin is released during physical stress. So we saw that mostly in rodents so far, even though I want to test it, where it seems to be gender-based. So it seems that oxytocin would be women-based, men will be vasopressin-based. So that means that male bonding would be done through physical stress. Army, training, Jiu-Jitsu, all that stuff, right? That would make sense. Right, so now, there was also, that's another thing, there was also an idea that autism was the epigenetic expression of the male genes, of the masculine side. Schizophrenia of the female side. Right, so that means that if you go that way, that would mean that autism and vasopressin are linked. But then, for example, oxytocin would be very low on the autism side, which is exactly what we see. Okay, but vasopressin would be the social bonding agent. Right, that is created during physical stress. So what do you think happens when you downregulate all the time? You have no social bonding. So then you would create more problem out of that. So what we saw is when we train them hard, at the end of the session, they are more receptive to IQs, to social connection and things like this. But that's exactly the opposite on how we deal with kids. We don't let them be physically violent, obviously, especially with the moms and everything. But what if it's just a way of communicating? Because they're being drugged out of their mind. SSRIs, we know, can create, by the way, funny things, SSRI can create a syndrome on overproduction of that vasopressin.
Okay.
Interesting. So, I mean, SSRI plus CrossFit, you could get panic attacks, which I've seen many times. Anyway, so, I mean, so imagine what those kids go through, either through the drugs or being downregulated in school, not mixed with other kids because they're so afraid of their physical reaction. But the physical reaction might just be an attempt to communicate, albeit incorrect in society. It might be based on physical things. So I think by allowing them to go to a 10, at least that's what we see, finally we enter their world. So there's a lot of stuff that I want to measure. So that's going to be in August. We do the blood test, and I might be able to get the vasopressin in because I'm pretty sure it's there, but now we have to.
Are you seeing changes in their behavior? Or seeing like some of these kids, especially when it comes to like particular foods? Are they starting to be more open to newer foods?
You know what we saw is we have a kid, Sam, the one who jumped the 30 inches, went from 15 drugs a day to 6. That's what we see. Wow. Yeah. We see less aggression, so we see less behaviors. Fortunately, sometimes you see the kids beating up their moms or stuff like that, like chasing them around the bed. And by the way, some of them, they're nonverbal, but they can still type. And they express that they cannot control that. They feel so bad about it, but they have no control over it. I mean, that must be terrifying. But they'll chase their mom around the bed for like 5 minutes. Yeah. And sometimes we had moms coming with bruises and stuff. So we saw a lessening of that, of those behaviors. So greater resiliency, the capacity to deal with bad events. Shit happens, man. And so, yeah, we saw also on the texture, they can take it a little bit better. There's less steaming. Like they have very specific behaviors. By the way, we still don't know what the disorder is from. We know it happens, but we can't tell you why.
There's such a wide spectrum of it. Sometimes some kids just won't talk. But then there's kids that every day when their parents try to feed them, the kids choke, they throw their food, they hit.
A lot of time is texture.
Yeah.
It's because the parents want to, you need protein. Yeah, but it's not the protein. It's that particular food might be like eating broken glass to them. Or, like a t-shirt, it has to be a specific feel because otherwise someone is stabbing you all day with that t-shirt. How long do you, especially if it's a young kid, how long do you expect him to keep it on? So they don't understand where it comes from. So it's like, oh, you just don't want to. It's like, no, it might actually be extremely overwhelming from a nervous system perspective, right? But so you have a lot of, by the way, one of the reasons with that too is we don't even know what autism is. So I explain it as a function. But if you look what they call autism, is usually the disorder they're talking about. And even that, there is no way to test it outside of behavior. So they'll tell you they like the round pattern thing. Right, but an Asperger, what they used to call an Asperger, is not a savant. It's completely different.
Yeah.
Right? So then what is autism then? They can't even answer that. So I remember, I think it was on Uberman, like they had that lady saying, yeah, they explained to you that the test of autism, they're all behavior-based. All right, but then how you know it's autism? Because you're not going to tell me anxiety is just autism. Like, but they look at circular object. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's a disorder because I do that as well. So what? As a kid, I love that. I'm just oh my God, this is amazing. Right, but that didn't mean, it made me suck in school, but it didn't make me... You see what I mean? So we still haven't even developed, okay, what are the tests for autism? Because we still can't. It's UCLA because they wanted to categorize something and they put it under the word autism. But I bet you like a third of it does not fit into the same category as the other ones.
Wow.
There's a lot of stuff that falls into that is probably, and I think that's the problem. That's what like RFK with the debate about the vaccines and stuff like that. It may be that the kid was autistic and then something created a reaction. And that reaction is a disorder. But they didn't get autistic. They already were there. Just a disorder showed up out of maybe pollution or whatever it is. But so the debate is far more complex than they make it out to be. They tell you like autism is this and that. It's like, that's not true. We just don't know. And they hate saying that. And plus you get to sell a lot of drugs. But autism is kind of a stepchild of psychiatry. They put it on the corner and we're dealing it, whatever. So that's what we're trying to do with Dr. Nasser is to try to go add resilience to better the symptoms. Because that's step one.
I'm curious, just from your personal experience, you've dealt with this your whole life. Did you ever have to use medication?
No? No, but I could have, because I had really dark moments. Around 18, it was really bad. Everything was super overwhelming and I could not put a finger on it. So at 18, it was really hard.
Okay.
I mean, I had my own way of fixing it that I would not... Like I took an entire box of amphetamines, like 24 of them, and then I went walking and I was like, either by the end of that walk, I feel correct or I jump.
Wow.
So I walked by the bridge, I was like, but I was dead set. I was like, either I fix the issue or I jump. So I went to jump and it went click. I figured it out and then I was fine. I don't do it.
Yeah,
that's not a good way of doing it.
Of course.
But my brother couldn't make it.
Was he also?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was obvious. He didn't make it. Yeah. No, so it gets very overwhelming. It gets better over time. You just, also you're not understanding what's happening.
And was your brother, he was autistic?
And most likely, yeah. He was,
Maybe bipolar?
No. It's very destructive, but his mother, he was my half-brother. His mother was worse than mine, which was very hard to do. But my father knew how to pick them. So his mother was even more abusive than mine, which is amazing. But he was excessively good at letters. So he's the one who made me read Nietzsche and all that stuff. Like he was the brightest, sharpest mind I've ever met. Way past me on this. But it's just the snake bit his own tail, basically. So he had finished Karl Marx by 13. Yeah, wow. So he was, at 14, he was talking to the local chapter of the Communist Party and explaining to them what Karl Marx meant, which I thought was hilarious. He was way older than me, but drugs, alcoholism, the whole thing, and then by 40, he was done.
Did you find it interesting that Nietzsche had his own set of problems?
Yeah. Yeah. The serpent usually will...
So many things, so many things that he explained ended up being kind of his own demise, I guess.
Yeah, but plus at the end, he was... what was this? Was it syphilis at the end? I can't remember. When he wrote, but he wrote like The Spag Zarathustra in 3 weeks, which is absurd. Yeah. But at the end, like his mind was just running.
I find that so interesting. And then Jordan Peterson, who studied a lot of his work, ended up with similar issues after learning a lot,
Yeah, or that's why he studied it in the first place.
Yeah, right.
Which I think why I was so captivated. The Spag Zarathustra, I read I was 16 or 17, and I felt that book was written for me at that time. It was a lifesaver in a way, but it also probably put me into that direction full blown. But the mind is still a beautiful thing.
You learn too much, get too close to the sun.
But I think honestly, what saved me is like I never went into drugs. I didn't get into benzos, like Dr. Peterson went. My brother did every single drug there was to do, and probably some more. I didn't. Because sports.
Not even recreational.
Sports. No.
Wow.
No.
Okay.
And my brother told me, don't ever touch acid. Ever.
Ooh.
He was like, that will wreck you. And so I never did. I never smoked. Yeah. Did some juice when I was a kid. Didn't make me any stronger. So I was like, that shit doesn't work. It's because I had no idea what I was doing, but that's another problem. But that was it. I was like, no, I don't like it because something else controls me and I refuse that.
How does some of this research and some of what you've been doing, how does it help with PTSD as well?
So, PTSD, it depends what you call. So what you see with PTSD in a way is exactly the same thing. You see a 12 when it should be a 6. So a trauma created a prior, right? An experience, a memory of something. And whenever that prior shows up, regardless of what the environment actually is, your answer is the same, is in what happened during that prior. So it's a bit like, in a way, in a sense, like schizophrenia. It's a hyper prior. You're putting too much weight into that prior. Mm-hmm. So what do? Exposure therapy. We're going to introduce stress. And right before you go to a 12, I'm going to ask you to come back to a 6 and find like that. And on top of it, whenever I'm going to give you a 10 and you're going to freak out, you're going to have a panic attack. Right before we go there, I'm going to teach you how to create a vagal response so that you don't go into a panic attack. So we do cyclical squats with reverse breathing in order to create a ventral vagus response so that you have control over your system losing its shit. Does that make sense?
Because you have to deal with it. What's reverse breathing? So
you inhale on the concentric face and you exhale through your lips on the eccentric face.
Okay.
And then you're going to squat. I'll make you do it a specific way, and it's going to create really. You'll see what I mean. You feel it in your eyes. It's a vagal response, basically. And so what happens with PTSD is suddenly you go sympathetic, then you go 2, 4, 6, 8, 26. You just go and you cannot stop your sympathetic reaction, the expenditure of energy, because the prior is so strong, you're back at that moment where you were getting blown up. So the amount of energy that is being spent is absurd, which every time makes you crash for 3 days, right? So whenever it seems that the thing is just speeding up out of control. So I'm going to show you how to apply brakes. So I'm going to do it in the gym where I'm going to stretch you, not too much that you lose your shit, but right at that moment, and I'm going to teach you to go down by 2. Then we're going to go back up, go down by 2, so that you learn that you can have control over the system being out of control. And that faith, that hope already does tremendously. And after that, I'm going to teach you never. Try not to go past that point where you go too far. But every time you can get a little bit closer to the sun. So it's resilience. It's 7 times down, 8 times up. The problem is they can't get back up. Like they just go out of control. I'm like, all right, so how do we stop the out of control? The best way to stop the sympathetic is to have a vagus trigger. So if we can create that, I can stop the out of control. I just have to catch it early enough. That's why I'm going to need the technology with UCLA, because with the machine learning, we know when to apply it before you're out of control. Because I can read it, but it's what if I'm wrong? What if I miss or whatever? And then they go into panic attack and then they'll pass out.
Now, is it multiple things? Is it I mean, it's probably a few things that give that away, but like, is there something that happens to the heart rate? Is there something that happens to
face?
It's just pure face.
Okay. I think for me to read, I'll read it off the eyes. So for example, when someone, that's the trick. When someone is crashed, look at the left eye. Okay. When you see a dead fish on the left eye, that means they crash completely. That's a dorsal vagal response. You want to have fun, look at Jeff Bezos and look at his left eye. It's fascinating. Yeah. So I'm guessing, I don't know what he's taking, but I'm guessing he's up there. Yeah. So sexual excitation, you'll see it on the left eye. You'll see this always. Yeah. So anyway, because we have more parasympathetic innervation on the left side. Wow. So I always check the left. But whenever they start to panic, you'll see the stress. And whenever they go blank, that's when the panic attack is going to happen. So you see what I mean?
Yeah. See that's not just a thing for him, huh? That's not just how I
don't. Yeah. So, but if you see all the pictures, look at the left eye. It's fascinating, especially him. It's crazy.
Wow.
Anyway, okay. So what you see in nature, you see that with birds. Is people think panic attack is sympathetic, always out of control. But actually, there's a phase where you go sympathetic, freeze, and after freeze, you go panic attack. So whenever they start to stress and they go blank, that means they went into freeze. The next step is a panic attack. So I have to stop them right before they go there.
And do you help them control this through like breathing? Like, okay.
And exercise. Actually, breathing by itself is not enough.
Okay.
You have to also have a physical movement with it. At least it works better.
Wow.
So far.
Can you overexpose somebody to these exposures? Like what's like ideal or?
I just I'll do it enough that they can get into a rhythm. So for example, I'm going to make you squat. I'm going to put you against a wall and make you squat up and down. You're going to exhale through the lips on the way down, inhale through the nose on the way up. But I want that in a circle, which means you never stop breathing, you never stop moving. And at first they'll go, and then what I want is like this. And the second they find that, that means they control, we stop right there. Because otherwise if you go too far, you'll crash yourself. Like it's an arch. You can't go too far either way. Otherwise you're fucking with things you don't fully understand and then you end up in another place. So that's where machine learning will help us. Is like, it's dangerous to have just me relying on just me looking. Like if we could understand the numbers better or what things are happening, it'd be, that's the study we're doing right now. So that's machine learning. The camera on the right is looking at my face and the one on the left is measuring my movements. And so we're doing a lot of that. Like right now we're in the machine learning phase.
So strength and some of what you're doing, sandbags and sleds and stuff. These are like things that are like cognitive, right? Like these are things that are gonna like.
But low skill always.
Right. Yeah. The sled is like hard to mess up.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So you don't have to every time, and there's no expectation. There's no failure into it. Like a sandbag carry. So. There's really little technique. I can do it fast, and there's less capacity for going into freeze because but whatever. So the sled is the best way to go there. And the kids also, they're especially not on the PTSD, although that can happen. On the autism, the coordination is an issue, and the loss of eccentric with autism, which I find I see it all the time, but we don't know. We don't know why.
What does that look like? Like if they're doing a squat, they just
they
fall?
Just fall. Yeah, they just fall. So this is interesting. So that we have an ESG. I didn't post it yet, but like that fucking helmet thing, right? So we're starting to use that. So I find it interesting. The eccentric, right, contraction is linked to the beta brainwave, resisting things. What's interesting, it's also one of the brainwave for language. Most of the ASD are non-verbal. I mean, so the worse he gets, the less verbal they are. That's what I find interesting. But look like language is playing the silences, just like music. So when you speak, you have to learn to accelerate, decelerate, and pause. So concentric, eccentric, isometric. What we see with autism is the isometric and eccentric is very hard to get by. But concentric, they do just fine. They actually can be very strong, but in a pure concentric, hence the sled, by the way. But the second you introduce eccentric and isometric, you have an issue. So is that what's happening with language? Is it because it's not that they can't express themselves because they can type. So for the longest time, we thought they can't speak because they're stupid. That's not true at all. Some of them have PhD that they did through typing. Right. So what if it's a language, the pattern is the same with speech as it is for exercise? So then does that mean that by bettering the eccentric, I can maybe help with the language? Don't know yet, but you get the idea.
You and your ladies had an awesome night. You got dinner or you just came back from the gym and it's time for that fun time. But you look down at your willy and, well, it's not working the way it should. Where's that blood flow? Well, that's where Joy Mode comes in. And I can read you these ingredients right off the bat because they're all natural ingredients: L-citrulline, arginine nitrate, panax ginseng root, and vitamin C. The thing about Joy Mode is you just slip this baby into a little bit of water, drink it in 45 minutes later. When you're getting ready to go to the Pound Town, you will be ready to rock. And you know what I mean by rock. Joy Mode's really awesome because there's a lot of things that people promote as far as sexual wellness tools, but there's a lot of weird ingredients in there. These are all natural ingredients that's going to help your own production of blood flow. Stick it in some water. 60 minutes later, you're going to be able to stick it into something else. Joy Mode's your way to go. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at usejoymode.com/powerproject. And at checkout, enter promo code POWERPROJECT to save 20% off your entire order. Again, usejoymode.com/powerproject, promo code POWERPROJECT, links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
I'm actually curious about this because there's somebody I know, relative, and he's very young. He's nonverbal, and like the mom and dad have been trying to figure out like what can we do, right? So in a situation like that, have you seen anything? Is there something that maybe people that have a child that's nonverbal, something they should try to do?
Yeah, we have one. His name is Theo, and he was very famous because he wrote books actually out of typing, but now he starts typing and he finishes his sentences speaking. With a very high pitch, by the way. It's always a high pitch. Okay. Always. I'm like, so there's something for you right there. They can't control the pitch, so I mean, like there's things like, but anyway, now he can finish speaking, and now he says he wants to start the sentences speaking. He says he wants to speak and be able to, yeah. So again, it's very high pitch, but there's a capacity there, but they have to slow down first. Okay. And early on, that's very, very hard. So they have speech therapy, but too many times they're just trying to compensate for the other side. So for example, other interesting facts, most of the kids are on their tippy toes. You noticed? Like when they work on the ball of their feet, always.
Kind of a texture thing probably too.
Yeah, something like that. So
way to balance in space and so on.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a balancing in space. So we saw too many times some therapists that were just making them work on their heels, because that way they don't work on their tippy toes. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't fix anything. Or does it? But a lot of the therapies for autism is that. Right. So there you go. She's pulling. We're doing good. She's on the ball of her foot. It's great. And there we go. And so but we have to create a prediction for them. Push this way. And over time, they learn to push. Yeah. They push harder and harder. Is it slow? Yeah. So for example, the kid is non-verbal. Yeah. So we might be able to at some point get something, but it's going to take a long time. Especially the parents at first, it's heartbreaking. They want it now. They want their kids to be normal. They want to fix the kid. That's not happening. What we can do is the symptoms. Why? And then we can work in that. So we can make him walk better. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to get good or bad. We're going to get better or worse. That's just something. It is what it is, right? So fully verbal, like a switch, there's something which just a pill will switch the thing. No.
Got it.
No. But that's because, again, autism is a function. That's who they are. It's like an anxious person. They will be anxious always. That's not the question. The question is, what do you do with it? Yeah. Do you make it work for you or against you? It's the same thing with autism. You can make it work for you. There are ways to do this.
So don't stop yourself from being an anxious person.
No.
Just figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah, you will be, by the way. You're just pretending that you're not anxious. I'm fine. You know that smile that they have?
Yeah.
And you go like, you're scaring me right now. Like, do you live in your basement or something? Like, it's because they go like, no, I'm just fine. The power of the mind. I'm fine because I say I'm fine. I'm like, okay, sure.
I've seen that in my girlfriend's eyes before.
Yeah, exactly.
She came in, everything's good.
Yeah. Let go of the knife, honey. So, no, you are anxious. By the way, it's fine. It makes you driven. You say anxious, that woman is in the room over there. You think she's easy to deal with? Why do you think she's so strong? It has to come from somewhere. Right, so we know what we do. We make her train 3 times a day. And my life is a lot better. I should be the first one to say, it's like, no, I cannot not train. Say 2 things. I have to stay hot and I have to stay sane. I'm like, those are good goals.
Yeah.
Let's work on that. But so she's extremely energetic. Like, you see how much she's a fucking, like, remember the Energizer bunny? That's her, right? So an hour, she'll be like this, and she's like, I have energy again. I'm like, let's go train. So imagine the anxiety level of that woman. And by the way, her thing is obsessive, not obsessive, because all autistic people, which she is, are ritualistic, but she's Asperger. So you notice how she stares at you? She's like this.
This is Sam. Sam has OCD. So, my girlfriend's the same.
You know what's funny with that is I had to teach her, like, stop staring. So you have to count to 3 and you stop. So she goes like this, then 1, 2, 3. and goes back to staring at you. And people are like, your wife scares me. I'm like, she scares me too. What do you mean? Like, but she trains a lot, so you're safe. That's how I know you're safe, is because she trained already, so we're good. So I made sure she was printing first. But anyway, so she can get ritualistic, can turn into obsessive. And that's bad. Then she starts to stress and everything. So she will be anxious about something. So I'll find her something to put that thing toward. And it can't be powerlifting, otherwise it will ruin her as an athlete. So I'll make her stress about something else. So it is my job to make her life chaotic because she's too structured. So I take my clothes and I just throw them everywhere in the house. And I do this for her. I want it to be known that I do this to help my wife be better in life. It's not because I'm messy. It's for my wife. It's out of love. It's just I'm misunderstood profoundly. But anyway, but I have to make sure. Like, so when I leave a week, I come back from LA, and she's in the house, and I can tell she forgot I'm there. Because she's going from, 8 o'clock, she does that. 8:15, she does that. 8:30, she does that. And I'm like, oh, she's back in being so ritualistic that every single thing will be scripted, which is really bad for her. So I'm like, all right, where are my clothes? Time to go crazy in the house again. And she's like, oh, hi, honey. I'm like, yes, I'm here. Thank you. She gets into those things. And that's what anxious people do. They get on rails, so they can't spin out of control because then it's really bad. So I'm like, all right. So let's deal with it. You're going to train 3 times a day, or you're going to study. I don't know. Go play Helldivers 2 for 6 hours. I don't know. Find something. We should have a team, by the way. Anyway, so that's how I relax. I put 700 hours on Elden Ring.
Oh shit!
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Anyway, so autism. Yeah, it works really well. I'm really good at it now. Anyway, so
that's a tough game to get good
really
at.
hard.
I finished it like 14 times now. So
Oh my God.
yeah, the fists are the best one, by the way. So you all know. If you know, you know. Anyway,
I get it.
So that anxiety, put it towards something. The most successful people you know are anxious. Jeff Bezos. How do you think you work 80 hours a week? Does Elon Musk look to you as a very relaxed guy?
Not generally.
Yeah. No. So you see that in autism, you see anxiety and everything because they always that need to be driven toward doing stuff. So the only moment where they're not anxious is when they're doing. Right. So an anxious person has to do. Right. So that's the issue. All right. So let's do. But the idea fixing anxiety is nonsense. They will just hide it, mask it, make it work against them. They'll be in freeze a lot. So you'll see people crashing themselves so they're not anxious. Right. Is that more efficient? Because now you're crashed instead of anxious. And by the way, again, anxious is your nature. So anxious is not always negative. So most likely when we say anxiety, we talk about the negative aspects of it. But again, there's a function there of to preparing you for the future. You go into a jiu-jitsu competition. If you're really calm, you're not going to do well. You go to a big podcast, you're slightly nervous before because you're trying to get ready. If you're really chill, you won't do that well. You need to get ready. So now, if you're too anxious, you can't speak.
Yeah.
Now we have a problem. So then we agree that it's your answer to the thing that matters, not the thing itself. It's completely okay to be anxious. By the way, you're not supposed to feel good all day. Stop being in the US constantly and come to Brazil a little bit. And you'll notice you're not going to be physically comfortable at all times. They have those tiny fucking mosquitoes that sting me through my shirt every time.
Oh my God.
They're tiny, but I bleed off of it. And it burns for 10 minutes.
Oh yeah.
Hey.
Right. So when things try to kill you all day, you're a lot less anxious, I got to tell you. Because you're busy being in pain. That helps.
Yeah.
So being in pain, it helps with anxiety a lot, I swear. Find your way. That's
What you got going on over there, Andrew?
Just again, kind of going back to the, bringing yourself down from like a 10 to a 6. So do you program that for people? Because I need help with that because I am that person, right? And
then we'll go at the end, right? And then we'll find what the number is.
Okay.
That might take a session or 2, right? And then you stay in touch with me. And then we're going to figure out if it's at 3, 6, or 8-ish, right? But there's a moment where your mind is going to break. And you're going to go toward the behavior. We're going to stop that, which means you're going to stay on the bike at that number, and you're not going to react that way.
Because what I notice in the middle of a roll, right? I'm not even there sometimes.
Yes.
I'm thinking about the next guy that's going to call me out.
You're disengaging.
I'm not even in the moment.
You're just disengaging.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you do. It's just a way of disengaging. Right. So there's a syndrome for that where you're disconnecting from yourself. Right. That's a way to get away from the stress.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a freeze mode.
Yeah.
Right. So that means that on the bike, at minute X, at that number, you're going to start to slow down. And I'm not going to let you. You're going to go back to that number so that you have to stay within the moment in an uncomfortable feeling.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And then so like, again, just because we are kind of like meatheads and we talk about programming and stuff, for this type of practice, like again, like how many times per week?
Oh, you do it every day.
Every day. Okay.
Yeah. And you're gonna hate me after 2 weeks because you're gonna be feel so much better 2 hours later. But I have people that text me going like, right, are they doing it, which they're not supposed to, but like, I hate you with a passion right now because this is the most uncomfortable I've ever been because you can't go to a 12, so you have no way out. So you will hate me so much while you're there, but it will teach you to stop that behavior that you've learned to do. So it's behavior modification.
Yeah. Because when you guys are talking about like smiling and saying like, oh, it's fine, my wife will tell you exactly what that face looks like. Yeah. Because like, I mean, literally happens like almost every day where it's like, what's wrong? Like, nothing, we're good.
It's like,
and she knows I'm lying.
It's like when woke people talk to you and they have that smile. And you go like, oh shit.
Something's wrong.
Oh, cult. I see a cult. I know a cult when I see one. They have that weird smile. I will always go like, you're crazy, lady. Yeah. It's that. Those are all learned behavior. So we just have, it's not breaking them, but we have to redirect them. Right?
And I really like the way you put it, like about, you're not going to get rid of anxiety.
No.
Like that's a good thing. Yeah.
But by the way, it's a function. It's like getting rid of hunger, but then you go, it's called Ozempic, but then you're going to die. Right.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. I'm curious because a while ago, I think it was, I don't know, 2 years back, we had Richard Aceves on the podcast and he learned a lot from you.
Yeah,
and
he was my boy.
And we learned so much about like the emotions and muscles, et cetera, on that podcast. And he learned that from you. How did you come across that stuff? Because before him, we never knew about, I mean, at least I know that I never heard about any of that stuff personally.
Yeah. So we call it emotional mapping. By the way, Richard's like my little brother. Best strength athlete I've ever trained, I think.
Wow.
Or close to, or let's say top 3. Because my office, he was, like that motherfucker. Like,
talk about good hair.
Oh man.
Fucking looks like a
fucking
Mexican
Mexicans,
Superman.
man. Yeah. And you know, with his smile, it's like, it's a Mexican Clark Kent.
Yes.
100%. Every time he's like, you want to be an actor? I was like, let him go. He's going to be a pro strongman. And I chose CrossFit. I was like, whatever. That motherfucker in front of me cleaned the 280 sandbag. I think he did a 300. I know he did a 280 and I know he pressed it.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Strong motherfucker. He would have been a pro strongman, guaranteed. Chose CrossFit, go figure. But, he was so strong. Anyway, we traveled, like we dated for years before he was married. So I was kind of offended, but because we did the seminars together for like 3 years and everything. And so during that, we were, it started to hit me when we were in Australia. So there's a guy named Wilhelm Reich, who was a student of Freud. We're talking 1920 Vienna. So it's very interesting because Freud, if you see, was all words, like Dr. Nasser is. So more like predictions type, right? And here comes Wilhelm Reich with it's not necessarily a new idea because you saw it with Chinese and a lot of philosophy, but he's the first one coming from psychotherapy, going into that aspect. And he's talking pretty much as, remember when they say like the body keeps the score? Yeah. Well, that's actually Wilhelm Reich who really said that first. And he's going into, in a way, the nervous system rings in the body that keeps tension where the tension gets stuck somewhere, and this is what the problem is. And so he had entire system based on releasing tension at specific spot of the body in order to let go of the problem. So actually, he was trying to for example, cure schizophrenia or at least lessen the symptoms based on that. And he had specific points that map the points like the Chinese. So he had an entire idea in his book, for example, character analysis and everything. And I started to study that, and I found that I saw the same thing through the internal talk, external talk, and things like that. So I was like, I wonder if, and I started to play around with that idea with more research. And there were some ideas, at least, of the nervous system that's starting to emerge. But then after that, we started to notice, you've been there on the sled when you push hard enough and you start crying and stuff come up. I was like, all right, so why and how? And then we started to exploring that. And certain patterns seemed to emerge. So I got into it very deep and everything. And then after, that was one of my disagreements with Richard, is when does that turn into self-indulgence? So I may give you a workout and you can make yourself cry. Right, so that's going to release that anxiety we were talking about. Right, so you're going to feel good for 2 hours. Right, so guess what you're going to do? You're going to do that every day. But then guess what you're going to do? You're going to stop stressing yourself. And so now only crying is a way to make yourself cry so you can release. Is that helping or is that self-indulgence now? You know therapy, typical therapy.
Yeah.
Now it's self-indulgence. It has nothing to do with therapy anymore. You're paying someone to talk to them about yourself for an hour. Therapists don't deal with hardcore stuff anymore. What they have is teenage girls saying, I don't like my friends. And they love that because the business is so much better. But what they do is making them talk about how miserable they are. Guess what you get? More miserable. But it's self-indulgence. All those women that say, you need therapy. Say, no, bitch. You need to stop yours. That's what. Because all you do is talking about yourself for an hour. And you love those words because someone is paying attention to you. It's self-indulgence. It has nothing to do with therapy anymore. So that emotional mapping, as interesting as it was starting to turn into that.
Got it.
Where people got away from training hard in order to create an emotion. Right, is the emotion there or are you creating it? Are you creating the trauma just so that you can create a reaction and feel better after? Because at least for 2 hours, you don't feel anxious. You know what the problem is with that? Is you stop working on making the anxiety work for you. Now you're just releasing it. Yeah, but it comes back. So now you're releasing it again. So how long are you going to do that for? Every day? But you can't train anymore. So when does it become a problem? And I thought it became a problem real fast.
Yeah.
And I saw it in my coaches and they all stopped training hard. And I was like, all right, this is not the way. So as interesting as this was, I backed off from it completely because I found that this was not serving my people the best way. So the problem again is with all this is the second you get toward the anxiety stuff, you'll do anything to make it stop, to make the disorder stop, not the function stop. Otherwise, you're on Ozempic.
I think a lot of people are like undiagnosed and they're training and they're burying a lot of their problems in fitness. And
100%.
that's part of the addicted fitness
100%.
thing that's going on.
Right, exactly. So, but at some point that you're not training to get better. You're just training to be able to go through your life. The problem with that is maybe you hate your life. I don't know, your job sucks. You don't like your relationship, whatever it is. Instead of fixing that, you're taking it into the gym. Right, so first of all, you're not training to get better anymore. And second of all, like, where does it end? Because now it allows you to take more shit in your life as long as you can put it more into the gym. You could see how that could spiral out of control real fast. So again, you're not dealing with your environment anymore. You're creating an environment to deal with your thing. Oh boy, that's dangerous. Well, and that's why we see in fitness. And that's why Ozempic is going to kill us all.
Wait, go into what do you mean the Ozempic's going to kill us all? What do you mean by that?
Right. Okay. So Ozempic is what? I'm not hungry.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't eat. Right. So do you understand the consequences of this?
You lose
all right.
a lot
So
of
there's
muscle.
going to be, let me put you two extremes.
Okay.
Obese person comes in, gone on Ozempic, loses a massive amount of muscle mass. So first of all, everything goes down function-wise. But what you call that? So they burn less calories and everything. I forget.
Metabolic rate.
There we go. Metabolism goes down. Right. So problem. But they can't eat. So that means that they have no pleasure of food anymore. You think it matters to an obese person? Right. So now they're a year and a half in. They're wrecked mentally, so they have to stop because they want to go back to eating. So they stop Ozempic. What happens? They put the weight back and more. Remember, they have less muscle now. So they're going to put even more weight back on. Right? Metabolism. And on top of it, they're going to eat with a rage because they have a year and a half now of pent-up emotion to release through food. So they're going to go back to their weight and you can add a good 20% to that with less muscle mass. So at some point, it's going to get dangerous again. So they have to go back on Ozempic. So now you lose more muscle, you develop a greater rage. Guess what happened a year later? Right. So that's one end on one side. On the other side, what do you think happens to teenage girls with an eating disorder?
They waste away.
Yeah, and they have to stay on it.
Suicide rates are high. Yeah.
So we're going to create a chemical anorexia. Like we didn't have enough problem with that shit because now you have the sunken face that they're looking for. But the problem is they can't stop because the second they stop, they put all the weight back on. So might as well put a gun to their head. Especially as Oprah saying it's a good idea. By the way, same people who say big was beautiful a few years back. We're all fat for big for training. Same people that say like obesity, you have no health issues are not selling Ozempic. The hypocrisy is anyway. But you go to the two extremes and you're gonna have a bigger problem with Ozempic than you will have with the opioid crisis. I can guarantee you that.
Wow.
This is gonna be $100 billion drug. $100 billion drug. Well, we know the side effects of it, by the way. Some people, especially obese, because of the slowing down of the digestive tract, will need to cut open everything to remove the food.
Has that happened or
Yeah, it has. Yes, many times. Yes.
Wow.
No. We're going down. The Peter Attia was talking because he had some of his people. I lost so much muscle. He was like, this is a disaster. Or in the making, this is worse than the opioid crisis. Wait until it hits TikTok.
I'm surprised it hasn't already.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised. But don't worry, it's coming. Don't worry. because they're going to make so much money off of that.
Yeah,
And
I know
by the way-
they've made like more drugs in that same vein,
Right.
and
So,
they're supposedly getting better.
How do you train starved? You don't. And by the way, why would you train since you're losing weight? So we're gonna see a reduction.
I don't know if it's starved though, because like people eat way too much, like way too much.
Yeah, but you don't eat at all.
I don't know if they're not eating at all, but
All right.
I think to
Put
reduce
the
some
pictures-
people's.
Put Ozempic Hollywood actors. Look at their face.
Yeah. Well, that's a different thing, but there's a lot of people.
No. But you're talking about obese people. That's not who's going to take it.
Right.
That's less than 10%
No, I
of who's
understand.
going to take
I
the drug.
understand. I agree with what
90%
you're
of
saying on
people
that,
need
yeah.
to lose 10 pounds and going to lose a massive amount of weight for vanity purposes. Now,
Right.
do obese people with diabetes need to take it? It's better than dying. It's better than the type 2 diabetes that is killing you slowly. Right. We're still negating the fact that we need to change your lifestyle.
Yeah, habits.
So
I
it's
would also assume that bodybuilders are already
yeah,
taking
you see
it
what
too.
I'm saying?
It's not really talked
it's-
about, but I think
it's-
bodybuilders are already on it too.
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah. When they
I just don't know why they wouldn't. I mean, bodybuilding's about not eating.
Well,
when you're dieting for
when you're
show.
dieting press, yeah. The problem is, but they're gonna have issues because once you ruin the stomach, you might have. I'd be curious what it does on water retention and stuff like that.
Are they worried about problems in the future?
No,
though?
yeah, that is no, not in the future. I'm wondering if that's going to help them during the prep or not. I'm curious. We'll see. No, but look,
I think it already is. That's what I'm saying.
yeah, they're making an informed decision, and it's all good. I'm just saying, like but it's like the painkillers. Remember when they say like pain
There's
is
always a price to pay. I agree with that 100%.
yeah, but if we stuck with just obese people that have diabetes, I would not say anything about it. This is not how this is going to be sold. What frustrates me is the same crowd that said big and beautiful. How dare you being fat phobic? That's what I think the hypocrisy to me is ridiculous. And the effect it will have on the fitness industry with yet another drug. When we're still not addressing the real problem. That's more that. But by the way, people do what they want, and it's for obese people, it's better than you eating yourself to death.
Absolutely.
But also, I don't see them stopping past a year on Ozempic, year and a half, they'll come off, I think, because they just lost all pleasure of food. So you're not solving anything.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah, it is. So there's a lot of, it's a bit like anxiety with the drugs for anxiety and everything. Because I had clients that asked me to take them off of it because, yes, it will zonk the bad stuff. But the problem is you never feel good either. You're always in the center. So to let go of the worst, you're agreeing to sacrifice the best. Which, if you're about to jump off a bridge, I understand. But that's not who took SSRIs. People were on it all year long, still do, because they allow them not to feel shitty. Yeah, but you also don't feel good. Is that what we're shooting for? You know what I mean? Like, so it's always those. And by the way, no, of course, if they want to take it, go ahead. But I had many clients ask me to take them off of it because what's the point of life at some point?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit, you know what it was with SSRIs that I saw as well too, because I saw it very prevalent in the, like that upper executive things. It's the same thing as steroids for sports. It allowed them to work 16-hour days, 6 days a week, because it keeps you in the center so you never feel too bad. You don't feel good, but it doesn't matter because you can work all day. So it was actually performance enhancing, the SSRI. That's where they were taking it, with the side effects that implied that. Yeah, and that's why they were to come off of it. But so when they came off of it, the emotional swings were powerful. So we had to deal with that for 6 months. And by the way, I mean, the lows come back. The heights came back, but so did the lows. So now we had to deal with the lows. So you have to deal with it sooner or later. Sooner or later.
If you're someone that's taking supplements or vitamins or anything to help move the needle in terms of your health, how do you know you really need them? And the reason why I'm asking you, how do you know, is because many people don't know their levels of their testosterone, their vitamin D, all these other labs like their thyroid, and they're taking these supplements to help them function at peak performance. But that's why we've partnered with Merrick Health for such a long time now, because you can get yourself different lab panels like the Power Project panel, which is a comprehensive set of labs to help you figure out what your different levels are. And when you do figure out what your levels are, you'll be able to work with a patient care coordinator that will give you suggestions as far as nutrition optimization, supplementation, or if you're someone who's a candidate and it's necessary, hormonal optimization to help move you in the right direction so you're not playing guesswork with your body. Also, if you've already gotten your lab work done, but you just want to get a checkup, we also have a checkup panel that's made so that you can check up and make sure that everything is moving in the right direction if you've already gotten comprehensive lab work done. This is something super important that I've done for myself. I've had my mom work with Merrick. We've all worked with Merrick just to make sure that we're all moving in the right direction and we're not playing guesswork with our body. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at merrickhealth.com/powerproject. And at checkout, enter promo code PowerProject to save 10% off any one of these panels or any lab on the entire website. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes. Just super curious, going back to the Ozempic thing, if somebody is obese and they're not eating, but they have so much excess fat, like how long would the body be able to just feed off of the fat and them just kind of be okay?
But it's not just not eating. It has profound effects on the gut.
Right.
So those effects also have their own side effects. So this is the issue. By the way, on an individual basis, I would agree. They need it, go. But we're talking about this individual versus group level. Mm-hmm. So for example, like, am I going to shame a 500-pound person by saying them like, you're fat, your health is bad? Of course not. I would try to help that person. As a group though, we have to agree to tell them, obese is not good for you. Your health is at risk. Stop saying it's beautiful, it's dangerous. We should not do it as a group. So there's always a difference between an individual and a group, right? As a group, Ozempic is a disaster. And again, the price to pay is the amount of chemical anorexia we're about to create in those teenage girls. Is that worth it? No. It has to be part of at least of the conversation. Can we at least have a conversation about it? Is really that. Please, let's have a conversation. This is a $100 billion drug. We should talk about what will happen next. At least have a conversation about it. To save one individual, are we going to sacrifice an entire... Like the teenage girls don't have enough problem with TikTok. That we're going to put that shit in. I have one, so I am worried a little bit. I mean, so is that, right?
Switching gears a little bit, getting into jiu-jitsu so early, I wonder if you can kind of describe to these guys who have been in jiu-jitsu 8 years or so, and 9 years, 2 years, maybe explain to these guys what jiu-jitsu looked like in the 90s. It seems like it's pretty inviting. Okay. Like these guys will invite and they'll say, hey,
stop
you come
making
over.
Me sound so old. It was the late 90s, not the early 90s. Come on. First of all, it was late 90s in France. So first it's in France. So what we have is we have the Gracie tapes. Right, Horion and Hoyce explaining
where they're fighting people.
Yeah, when Hoyce was fighting early on. Yeah. So we also had they had an instructional video where they explained the armbar and the triangle, and we all studied it for hours. One sweep, one triangle, one armbar, and that's all we did. So that's jiu-jitsu back then. By the way, there's only white belts in France. I get to the US, and non-Brazilian, there's white belts and blue belts. You guys don't understand. We had nobody to spar with than each other.
So and no one really to teach.
Well, the Brazilians at least were there, but it was a bunch of spas trying to kill each other because we're all white belts, right? So it's like, and then, hey, he's a blue belt. And then there was that one American purple belt, and we're all like, oh, he's a purple belt. It's like, really? He must be like, did God talk to you? Like, you're a prophet now, you know what I mean? And so that was mostly a bunch of blue belts going at each other. So you go to competition, you got white belts, blue belts, bunch of Brazilian competing against each other. That was it. That was literally Copa Pacifica, first competition. I won. White belt. I was so proud. Yeah, but I'm a badass now. Yeah. But then there's a blue belt. I was like, whoa, that's hard. I don't know if I'm ready for that, right? And that's it. We had white belts, blue belt. That's all. So that's the only sparring we had. So, like, the techniques were... The first time I sparred with a jiu-jitsu black belt, so Brazilian, right? He had technique. I was like, I didn't know you could put your foot there. What is this? It's like, that's not what the Hoyce was saying. That's not what a sweep is. You put your knee that way and you put your hand there, and then suddenly you have his knee on my bicep and he's sweeping me like fucking 6 feet into the air. And I'm like, okay, that's not jiu-jitsu. What was that? And then so it was, he had very little students. So basically ended up being a private session every single time, every day for 5 days, 6 days a week for 2 years. Wow. He beat the shit out of me. It wasn't a private session. It was a sparring session, and he used me as a punching bag. So, because he wanted to compete and everything. So he whooped me. I got very good at defense. He whooped me for an hour every day and everything. And then I would take it out on the blue belts. And that was jiu-jitsu back then.
That was...
Hey Diogo at first. He was a Carlson Gracie,
and
black
then,
belt. John Machado. And then John Machado was my true master, true teacher. Again, only blue belts in the gym. And John told me, relax, Flo, relax. What? I am relaxed. It's like, no, you're not. Choked me again. And he was like, but it was crazy because I was trying to resist everything. Like, if he doesn't submit me in the next 36 seconds, I win, right? Isn't that what the goal is?
In the beginning of the show, how many times did you say that he choked you out?
And I'm not kidding. I bet you it's over 2,500 times.
You said, I wrote it down.
2,600. Yeah, exactly.
2,853 times.
Yeah, it has to be. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Well, imagine like it's like what 4, 5 times per session.
Yeah.
5 times a week. Sometimes twice a day. For so many years. Yeah, probably. Oh yeah. I must have tapped in my life more than 3,000.
And you never
times.
got close to.
I put him in bad situation twice. I didn't say submit. I say I put him in bad situations twice. Where he would go like, that was good.
Yeah.
I was like, thank you. I'm so happy. I went home and couldn't sleep for 2 days. And I mean, it's like, I put him into a bad situation. And then like, he would armbar me from the side, control, always the same side. And I'd be like, no, you don't. Because I knew exactly what he was going to do. I put my elbows like, try to get me now. And then 3, 2, 1, put his knee exactly in the right place. Then armbar me. And I'm like 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Every single time. I was like, you son. I could not stop it. I knew his game perfectly. I knew exactly what he was going to do, when he was going to sweep me. Could not stop it.
Let me ask you this, because so many people that start jiu-jitsu, like so many people feel like they have profound experiences that change the way they look at sport. Some people not so much. But for you, having done so many sports, so many, was there anything that you got from there that you think has been just super beneficial?
Oh yeah, jiu-jitsu. I mean, yeah, jiu-jitsu. I would say that changed me because it changed my outlook on a bunch of stuff. Because again, at first I was fighting him on everything, trying to resist, again, if I don't get submitted in the first minute, I win. And he was getting really pissed at me every time because he knew that's what I was thinking. He was like, stop. Okay, fine. Because he was like, no, that's not jiu-jitsu. Like, relax, accept the sweep because I'm going to get it anyway. But look at the way I'm doing it so that you can replicate it.
Yeah.
So the idea was that, at least the first 1,000 times you tap, you're like, that you got lucky. Next time, that won't happen. Like, I will never tap ever again. We all say that shit. Right. And after a while, it doesn't matter. You're learning jiu-jitsu. So it wasn't so much objective-based. It was like, accept the sweep, but then realize how he's doing it so that you can apply to the next guy. And then, so I stopped resisting, and then that's when I started learning. So that I had a profound aspect on, change on me in the way I was approaching, strategizing certain things. You have to understand, it's very overwhelming. The contact is very overwhelming for me. So I was always in a fight mode at first because he was always like, it was very strong feelings toward that. And so to learn to relax through that, also talk about exposure therapy was just really, really good for me. And it's control violence. So once you can control that, your fear overall goes down. Your fear of physicality goes down, so you become more resilient. So the resilience it taught me, jiu-jitsu, I'm mostly not scared. Like, I'm not going to necessarily win a fight, but you're going to have to bleed to beat me. So that's enough that I'm reasonably not too scared of a physical confrontation, even in Brazil, because I can make it last longer. Anyway, I won't be at risk of.
Yeah.
And so that builds a confidence in you and stuff like that Arab Jiu-Jitsu really changed a lot of things, especially because I started at 18 when I was really having a hard time. And it really allowed me to go through from that.
As you started to gain some of this knowledge of like torque and torsion and how to move the body, did any of that help or improve your jiu-jitsu, or does that not kind of really work on the mat?
No, it didn't. But what it did though is to give me some ideas about like how to work on my own games. What certain things felt, because I could tell when I was very reactive versus things I was more comfortable with. And that's something you learn from purple to brown, is to develop your own game. So that really helped me at that time of going like, this is how it's supposed to feel versus being overly reactive. What helped me really was the nervous system stuff. Because once I learned to control it, I freaked out a lot less during jiu-jitsu.
Nervous system stuff, training in the gym kind of stuff?
Right, like the same thing I apply for PTSD. The reason I created it is because I did it for myself first. Right, so I've learned not to be overwhelmed by certain things, and that I used in jiu-jitsu. So the resilience that I developed in Strongman helped me tremendously with the jiu-jitsu.
And the strength that you gained from Strongman, how did that help?
Oh yeah, no matter what they say, I don't care about the whole technique stuff. If you're fucking strong, it's gonna help you a lot. Right, because like once I was bracing and stuff, like I was a brown belt at the time, but the dude were like trying to move me. I'm like, Stay here. And I mean, where are you going? Come back here. And then I'm going to pass the guard by just bullying you around. And you're a big sandbag bitch. So I'm coming. And so, yeah, it helped. I'm sorry to tell you. Like, yeah, of course, technique goes a long way. But so does strength here and there. Yeah, because it's not powerlifting strength is a bit different from strongman strength because angles and everything. The sandbag teaches you to deal with a very awkward object. So when I had to use my strength, I was very good at it.
Do you think that's one of the better things someone that's maybe newer at jiu-jitsu could use is just something like a sandbag?
Yeah, a big ass sandbag. And by the way, this is like, in a way, wrestling conditioning, right? If you can shoulder a 100 kilo sandbag, you'll see that handling a body does not hurt nearly as much because it's the same type of strength. It's awkward. You have to squeeze. It works way better, I think, than the barbell in that sense.
I think what's interesting about the sandbag is that you have to squeeze it. I think that helps a lot with bracing. Like to me, it hurts my back way less to pick up a sandbag than it does to pick up a barbell.
Right, because you have to put the obliques in right away, and you don't have a choice, right? Plus, it's everywhere, and I love that because the skill is on the sandbag. You get it right away. The sandbag teaches you how to lift it real fast. Otherwise, it just doesn't move. You're like, the first time it's heavy, go, oh, all right, well, that doesn't apply, so let me work on my sumo again. And you start to squeeze everywhere, and suddenly you use your biceps and your back and your shoulders, just in a way that you would do with jiu-jitsu. So I think the best strength for jiu-jitsu is the sandbag. But speaking of that, I got that out of training at Barra Gracie in Barra Tijuca in Brazil from the Cuban wrestling conditioning coach that they had there. That guy was a goldmine. He was a Cuban and he would train the wrestling team in Cuba. And what they did, because I guess no equipment, is they would go on the beach, on the sand, and they would do wrestling exercise, but like you take the guy, put it on your shoulder and squat him. Fireman's carry, all that stuff. So really almost like a sandbag workout on the beach. You do 15 reps, 9 to 12 exercises, 3 rounds. So you do it, I do it. So the problem is, of course, when the guy picks you up and put him in his shoulder, you're not breathing. Because, you're halfway with his shoulder and your ribs. So you can't breathe. And then it's your time to squat. And you go, wait. How does that work? So I died. Yeah. Hard. Like hardcore died. So bad.
I'm really curious about this because you were talking to us about in the gym, you and what's your girlfriend's name? Or your wife's name? What's your wife's name?
Janina.
Yeah. You guys were talking to us about like how she runs off of the bones of her feet, right? Yeah. And we had Kador Ziani. He's like he's one of the guys who's done a lot of dunk contests in the past.
He's French too, I think. Right?
Yeah, I think Kador is too.
We're everywhere.
But he was talking about how like he would come when he came into the gym, he was doing a lot of stuff where like he was kicking with that part of his foot, kicking hard objects, and he would jump off of that part of his foot, right? So when did you realize how big of a difference stronger feet can make for movement? Because I don't think a lot of people realize that.
I didn't realize it until she taught me.
Oh,
because she was like, let me show you sprinting. I was like, I'm slow. White dude, I can't jump either. It's fine. Like, I'm really strong though. And she was like, no. Let me show you. I was like, all right, fine. We go over there. And I did not understand sprinting at all. By the way, sprinting is not running fast. It's not that. It's even though it's close to pose running, it's still its own thing. Like, you can't sprint like that long distance. You would have to adjust anyway. But I go into it, and for me, running fast or everything is through the glutes, through the legs. So more like the hips thing. And she's like, no. We're going to work with the feet. And I'm like, all right, I'm not understanding. And right away, she makes me do everything with my toes up and hitting that bone of the foot, but directly onto the bone. And I was like, well, that hurts. Like, I don't like it. And she was like, don't be a pussy, just keep going. All right, fine. And the next day, I can barely walk. My feet were so sore. But then we keep doing it, and honestly, I feel completely retarded. Like, she's a great athlete. I'm a fairly good athlete too, but next to her, I was like, I don't look like her when she's doing it.
Yeah.
And she's doing exercises, I was like, I don't understand. Like, she could run almost at full speed with her legs straight. Like, doing that exercise she was doing, but she's at a speed that I can't match while her legs are straight. I was like, and it sounds exactly the same that when she's running. And she's like, yeah, it's the same thing. That's how I run. I was like, I don't understand. I'm pushing off my feet. She's like, no, you don't push, you pull. So she kept explaining the stuff, and it made no sense until it took me like 4 to 6 months until my feet developed enough that I could start doing what she was talking about. And I was like, oh, is that what sprinting is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because I'd never sprinted in my life. I can tell you that. But my feet were sore for 6 months. Like, I could barely come down the stairs. It was every day. I was like, this is ridiculous. And my low abs were so sore. 10 years plus of jiu-jitsu. And I was like, I have good low abs. Like, no, I didn't. Not like that. And she taught me to lift my knees properly. And I never ran correctly. That's when I discovered we had, at least not sprinting correctly. But the impact on the bone was absurd. And the second thing that killed me with sprinting is how out of breath I got. God, it was exhausting.
Yeah.
Like we would do 30 minutes. Felt like it was felt like a sled workout. I was like, I don't understand the violence of sprinting. That's what surprised me the most. It's like this was one of the most violent things I've done because the impact on the foot was so hard. Mm-hmm. And that hurt, by the way. I know maybe it's just me being a little bitch, but that shit hurts. And so her feet are like so strong. And what I learned too is like I was watching her sprint, but I could hear her hit the ground so hard. And she could jump, like about that high with her legs straight without using flexion of the knee, just off the foot. Like when she was at the top, I swear, it was 14 inches, her feet would get to 30, 35 inches in the air.
Yeah.
Legs straight just off, by the third jump, she had 35 inches high with no extension of the legs. Mm-hmm. Her legs completely straight, just out of hitting the foot. And you can hear the sound of it, like, blam, 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 just hitting this part. And I was like, all right, I don't understand. And so then within 6 months, I was like, oh, wow. But it was a new world. It was the first time doing jiu-jitsu. You know, when a new world opens to you, where you go like, I didn't know this existed. You know, like you always turn the wrong way at first and you go like, I don't understand how to move on the ground. You think you're a good athlete until you have to move, until the first time you spar, and then you realize you can't move. That was the exact same thing for sprinting. Yeah. I was like, I don't know how to do any of this. This is completely foreign to me. I just know I'm really sore the next day. Mm-hmm. So that was an eye-opener. And what struck me, I was like, why don't wrestlers and kickboxers or boxers know this? Because then suddenly, instead of always going off of the flexion of the leg, you could go off of the foot. You would tell what you're doing less to your opponent, and you would be just a little bit faster because you wouldn't have to lose the time to bend and then move forward. So instead of pushing, you could pull. That's much faster. And there's no telltale sign. So I'm amazed that in jiu-jitsu, wrestling, MMA, they do not see that.
Yeah.
But that's because I think when you see the sprinters train, you think you understand what they're doing, but actually you don't. And unless you've trained like them, you don't understand what they're doing.
They're moving way too fast. You can't tell what the hell's going on.
Yeah, it's a bit like Olympic weightlifting. You think you know what they're doing. No, you don't. So sprinters, they go, you go like, oh yeah, move your feet fast. And you don't realize the amount of stuff that they actually do because they're just so good.
Yeah.
They're so amazing. And by the way, if you're not a sprinter, you're not a sprinter. I can tell you that right now. I don't care how much you're going to work at it. I suck. Not
I like that you said it's not running fast because it's not related to jogging.
No,
it's not related to running, and it's not related to even running fast.
No,
Sprinting
it's not a
different category.
Yeah, it's completely. They're pulling.
It's a different exercise.
Yeah, completely. So right away with Graham, she could tell us, he's a long distance runner. Like the dude that take 5 steps, and she was like, long distance runner, nerd. So that was. Hey, I'm quoting her. I'm just saying. Sorry, Graham. That's what she said. But by the way, she could tell because he sits too much. He's doing this. He's doing that. And it's true. When they were running next to each other, right away you go like, oh, it's not the same sport.
Interesting.
Yeah. You guys don't like. He leans forward because he wants to control his fall, where she's completely upright. Because you can't pull unless you're completely upright. So sprinters are upright. Whereas anybody who runs leans forward because you're catching.
She's upright and her knees go forward so much that it looks wrong almost.
Completely.
A little bit until she gets to full speed and you're like, that looks amazing.
I'll show you a video of me while she's teaching me. I look entirely retarded. I'm trying to do the thing with the knees forward. Me looking in going like, never show that video to anybody. This will not happen. Like it took me, I can't process the knees forward. Like, they say, like, don't be in the past. So they never let their heel go back. But then how the hell do you run? With
their heel comes up and not
comes
necessarily
up and then forward,
back.
but never back. So when they do broad jumps or long jumps, they never actually, their heels don't go past the line. They stay in front.
And that's the big difference with fast running. You'll see the person's feet going behind the body quite a bit.
Yes,
you see Eliud Kipchoge, fucking hauling ass.
Yeah.
You'll see his feet behind him.
Way behind.
But when you see Usain Bolt, you see him pulling his foot under his like butt almost.
Yes. Yeah, almost at the level of the hammy.
Yeah.
You know, like we all want to kick our own ass. The sprinters, no, they're not here. They're actually way forward when they hit the hammy more than they hit the glute level. And so, but again, even when she does broad jumps, she never breaks the line. Which I did not, honestly, like, I'm not that bad of an athlete, but it took me an hour to go like, how do I do this? Because I realized I was actually using my upper body and arching. And so I was always going this way, where how she never arches. She's always never breaks the line. And yet has a great broad jump forward. I was like, all right, what's happening? I'm in a twilight zone. Like, I'm like, this is that moment where like, I don't understand. Oh yeah, when she jumps. Yeah, she has those things where.
Like she doesn't load up.
Shit.
Yeah. She never loads back. Yeah, when she fully extend, we all do this where we arch. Look, she's never going to arch.
Right. Neutral spine.
Yeah. I was like, but you can't. I mean, I can't. So if I can't, no one can. Right? That's how the rule works. So, and I was like, wait. So I did it and I thought I tore my quads the first time because suddenly I was actually using my legs. I don't have any legs, so that explains a lot. But suddenly I was like, and again, my low abs and everything, I was like, I can't use my back. If I can't use my back, I don't have anything. So I was like, what do you mean? So that explains why I can't jump, outside of being white. But so the way she was doing it was, I was like, I don't understand. This is white belt jiu-jitsu, where like, I don't understand which way, how you're moving, how you're doing what you do in such a relaxed state. So that was a late in life, tremendous learning experience was sprinting. It didn't have the effects, obviously, jiu-jitsu had, but from a pure coach perspective, like, technician, everything, sprinting was one of those moments in my life where, as professionally at least, one of the biggest one where I went, oh, everyone needs to know this. But the problem is, you look at it, you don't know what you're looking at. So unless you've done it enough, you go like, yeah, I can, I know what they're doing. I'll do it on the side twice a week. Don't worry. So we give them drills and everybody fucks it up because it's hard. It's not, the problem is that it's not what you think it is.
Yeah.
So you have an entire visualization of running in your head that is wrong because you jog. And they don't.
Got it.
They don't. It's doing, like it's raining Randy. Remember in CrossFit, like what they call a snatch? It's not a snatch. It's a muscle snatch, extension of the spine, and they just extend with a tricep. That's not a full snatch. So you're calling it a snatch. But if you do that, you're not learning to snatch. You're just learning a flexion extension of the spine with an extension of the tricep at the top. That's not, they just call it a snatch. So it's the same people with sprinting. People have that word in mind. But what they're doing is Randy. They're not doing an Olympic weightlifting true one web max with 200 kilos. So
Andrew,
that's the issue.
Andrew, can you bring up that clip from Brad Kern? We had one of our friends on the show, Brad Kern, and he was explaining how these particular runners, Jacob Ingebrigtsen, I think is his name, if I'm saying that right. And he talks a little bit about lactate and anaerobic threshold. I know that's something that you talk about a lot. So it'd be cool if we can kind of get your thoughts on
right. So
what was said here. So he'll play it here in a second and just react to it when it's over with.
Methods are really novel and super interesting.
What's he doing?
Like you have this sense of what a distance runner does, and they go out and run 100 miles a week, and they're always running. And what him and his brothers do, they're trained by their father, who was completely unschooled in athletics. He just studied. He was like a regular guy, engineer, and studied from all the greats and put together this programming. Jakob's older brother Henrik is 10 years older than him, so he was the first to kind of immerse into this unique training. They run right near anaerobic threshold all the time almost. And so they're running these, what you would call hard workouts, often twice a day. But it's right at this pace, the threshold is the term. And that means it's right before you would plunge into lactate accumulation, which would make your muscles burning and you'd have to stop. And then they've thrown out a lot of the easy stuff, but they never exceed this capacity in training.
Right. So yes and no. First of all, no, the muscles are not burning because of lactate. No, and there is no such thing as lactic acid in the human body. Lactic acid is broken down into lactate and an ion right away. So you understand, as a liquid, lactic acid would be at a pH of 3.2, 3.4. So you can imagine that it cannot run through your veins, right? So there's no lactic acid. It's only lactate, first of all. And anaerobic, so there is a threshold that is talking about, yes, but it's not an aerobic threshold. And lactate is a proxy to that threshold, but it's not the culprit of that threshold. So, for example, lactate can be produced aerobically. By the way, none of this is mine. There's a guy named George Banks studying that. He posted the theory of the lactate shuttle theory in 1980. So it's been around for, it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
You would think he would cross over. He didn't. So it's not aerobic threshold with lactate production or whatever. That doesn't mean what he says is wrong. I'm just talking about the terms being used that are incorrect. But what he's talking about, the guy is at the threshold where there is about to be a massive increase in lactate accumulation. Right. So accumulation can happen from two reasons. Either it's not being ejected, processed, or whatever, or you're producing a shit ton more. Both with get accumulation. That idea of anaerobic threshold was like, because there is not enough oxygen coming in, you're not processing the lactate, because the lactate is a waste product, right? That it can be processed with oxygenation. And therefore, at that moment, because you're right at that threshold, the creation of lactate surpasses your capacity to process it. Right. That's anaerobic threshold. So first of all, lactate can be produced aerobically in the brain, in the heart, or stuff like that. So no, actually, has nothing to do with anaerobic. We thought, so it started in 1920, where a German biologist was studying glycogen. He wanted to see how glycogen ended up in lactate. So he stuck a frog leg with an electrode and saw production of lactate. So then, obviously, lactate is a waste product that is created in an anaerobic situation. Right, but there was another conclusion that could have been made that it didn't, is that by creating the muscle contracting like that, there was a need for more fuel being created, right? And that fuel was not being dissipated because you lacked the rest of the frog, which was a problem. So that's where the in vitro versus in vivo studies are very important, because in vitro, like in your frog leg, you're going to create something, right? But that's functional segregation. You dissociate things into parts so you can study them. Right, but if you don't put them together, it doesn't do anything. So for example, Da Vinci had those things that he used where, you have one cog going left, the other one going right, and at the end, you have something going up and down.
Okay.
You've seen those, right? The Da Vinci models.
I think so.
It was, anyway, so basic engineering, right? So if you take one cog and you notice that it's going left, it doesn't tell you what the whole system does.
Okay.
So that's a little bit the problem when they start to study lactate. Is they saw one thing and make conclusion based on that without seeing the whole picture. So we did a study with one of my coaches. He did it with his marathon runners, where we put them through state sprints and we would measure lactate. And there is that moment, that threshold at which the lactate shoots up. The thing I was trying to show is that so anaerobic threshold, what if it's just production of fuel that is starting uncontrollably? So why could that happen? Well, maybe because, so I'm going to cut it short, a threat is being detected. So therefore, the energy production goes up tremendously. You have to understand that lactate is produced through glycolysis, right? So the end product of glycolysis is not pyruvate, it's lactate. This is where they're going to lose their shit on the comments, all my would-be biologists. But I'm not saying it. I can show you the studies that say that. It's not me. Anyway, so lactate being a fuel, not a waste product. So with that idea and others, the body being predictive and not reactive, I'm like, all right, so what if at that moment of threshold is when the mind goes to shit? We go from basically fight to flight. And so there's a threat to the person, therefore, fuel is being produced at a higher level. Like a panic attack, a physiological panic attack of sorts. Right? Okay, so what we did is we measure right at that moment, and we started to look at pupil dilation, and we asked the people, how did that feel? And to the T, all of them, at that moment, the workout went from being you hunting the workout to you being hunted by the workout. You know that feeling,
yes,
right? When you know you're losing.
Yes.
This is where we saw the lactate popping up. So my idea was, what if it's just production of energy, extra production of energy, because the threat requires it. You have to identify a threat that requires you dealing with it, hence a greater, not a panic button, but an afterburner button, a fuck it button. And that would be the lactate production. That makes sense? Because the threat goes, and then if the threat is too high, then you go into freeze.
Yeah.
And then from there, you go into panic attack again. So the freeze would be 18 millimole or 24 if you're trained, then you crash correctly. So what he would be doing with that workout is taking you to the threat level, where you're about to lose the workout, but you never do. So what you do, you get confident as an exposure therapy to push your nervous system always a bit further without going into that extra production that has its own cost. So the problem is when you go into hyperlactatemia, or in that case, high production of lactate, is of course energy production come as a cost, and acidity is one of them. So lactate is a proxy for acidity, but there is no such thing as lactic acidosis in that sense. So if you look at it from a nervous system perspective, if you were to train right at that threshold, you would allow to push how much pain you can take. That's La Fontaine. You can beat me, but you're gonna bleed doing so.
Yeah.
So that workout makes complete sense to me. That's what I do with the sled all the time. But you cannot lose. So we're going back to the Imam, in a way, idea. So that threshold workout, I agree with completely. We're going to get you there, and you're going to learn to push, winning all the time, so that you can push further and further and further into your reserves onto going there. So it's resilience of the nervous system. We're going back to the same idea. And I think lactate is a proxy to tell us how we react to that point of loss.
I think it's awesome, all the work that you're doing for autism and PTSD. My friend Andy Triana, Go Superbrain on social media. He's also doing some work, so maybe we can connect you guys.
We love that.
I got a couple other friends that are into that kind of stuff.
I would love to show them what we saw.
Yeah. Where can people find you? Where can they learn more about what you're doing?
Instagram, StrongFit1, because I'm not on social media anymore. I'm trying to back off more and more. So we'll put more stuff about the autism. We'll have because we're opening gyms to be able to do this with my partner. So but basically StrongFit1 on Instagram, and I'll try to keep everybody in touch about that stuff. Because you know what interests me is we're trying to build more gyms, because each gym is 120 families on average.
Wow.
We can help. So that's really the point. Those studies are great, but it's toward helping the families. So that's what we're trying to do.
Do you have any online education at all, or no?
Yeah, on a mentoring program, but we're developing that better as well.
Okay.
So because with UCLA, they're going to most likely help us get to use their platform so that we can develop a certification toward all of that, because we need coaches, obviously. And so I'm trying to develop in that sense. I suck at structure, so UCLA is going to help greatly doing that. Let's put it this way, because I'm more conceptual, obviously. So, with the savant stuff, that means that I'm really good at finishing incomplete patterns. That also means I cannot finish things. So people that know me know that. Yeah, at 80%, I'm done. So where it kills me is competitions.
Yeah.
Because I can never prep the last 6 weeks, because I'm done already, because the pattern is completed. So I cannot finish things. Kills everybody that knows me. Like, they all know. So structure is always a problem. Plus I'm chaotic, but that's mostly that, because I know, I'm good. No, you haven't done it yet. It's like, yes, I have. It's all good. Those are not the joys you're looking for. It's all good. So yeah.
This episode with Julian was amazing, and so is this episode right here with Richard Aceves. Julian was Richard's mentor, and in this episode right here, we go over how emotions are in your muscles. This one's crazy. You'll learn a lot from it, and you'll learn a lot of things you can take away into your lifting routine. Check it out.